everyone. Welcome to Ludo History, as always, and welcome back to what is for now going to be the final episode of Historians versus New World. It's been a long-running series, but, I think it's about time we wrap it up. The game is super dying, and therefore, I think the amount that we can actually say about it is coming to an end. And for this finale, I am joined by Jeremy Salkeld, coming back from the stream, from, you may remember, from the Legend of Tianding streams. So, he is back, and a very warm welcome to him. So,
Hello. Yes,
yes.
I am back. It's me.
Do you want to introduce yourself to anyone who maybe doesn't know you?
Yeah. So hello. I'm Jeremy Salkeld. If you're around on Reddit communities like Ask Historians, you'll know me as Enclave Microstate. Basically, I at the moment am kind of between degrees, so to speak. But my specialism is in the late Qing period. My major focus is on the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, which, long story short, Christian nationalism in mid 19th century China
I love it.
But in a broader sense, if you're going to talk about the Qing and about issues of ethnicity, that will get you into a lot of holes in a lot of areas that have been, some very well filled, some less well filled, and a big dimension of that has been discussions of Qing imperial policy and of Qing colonialism, and in turn what that may say about earlier periods of colonialism in Chinese history and how it relates to European colonialism. Basically, there's a lot of colonialism to go around, even if you don't specifically focus on colonialism.
Great.
So that's kind of why I'm here.
And that fits pretty nicely with colonialism, Ren Fair, New World.
Yep. There's also kind of a separate interest, because if, like me, you're someone who answers a lot of questions on Ask Historians, you end up dipping your toes into a lot of areas that aren't your main area, but are related, and that includes Gavin Menzies and the whole China discovered the Americas conspiracy theory.
Yes.
Which,
this is
is
a great
part
place
of this,
to start.
so... Yes.
So, why don't we start at the beginning for anyone who doesn't know, what is the conspiracy theory?
So, oh dear.
Yes.
Oh dear.
I see we're at a strong start, choking, and we haven't even, switched to the game yet.
Yeah, this is great. So, I actually need to check when Gavin Menzies, the late Gavin Menzies, he died early in 2020 of non-COVID related reasons. When he wrote the thing, well, sorry, he didn't write the thing. In 2002, a book comes out by a guy called Gavin Menzies, claiming that it's called 1421, the year that China discovered America, was it? No, the year China discovered the world. It basically alleged that the Ming treasure fleet under Zheng He, around 1421, sailed basically everywhere.
Nice.
The actual historical record shows that they never went any further west than Mogadishu, which is pretty far west,
That's
but not that far west. Menzies argues that they sailed around all the everything. Everyone summarizes it, as that one where they sail to the Americas. That's not entirely true, because, the easy way to do that is across the Pacific, easy. In his version, they go all the way around Africa and then cut across the Atlantic. But they also went around the Pacific and Australia and New Zealand and most of Polynesia. And also, he then came out with a book in 2008 that argued that they sailed through a apparently extant Suez Canal into the Mediterranean and kickstarted the Renaissance in 1434. Yep.
I hate to bring dates into this, but we're about 4 centuries off there.
Anyway, the thing about it is that the proof for it is incredibly tenuous, and by incredibly tenuous I mean next to non-existent, and by next to non-existent I mean actually non-existent.
Yeah.
There is, his principal evidence is that they could have done it, which I will admit is true.
All right.
But the only evidence that they did do it is this allegation that he found, well, a guy in China found a mid-18th century copy of an early 15th century map that depicts, allegedly, in great detail, the coast of the Americas. Menzies, of course, being Menzies, then alleges that Columbus must have had this map, even though it doesn't even have any bearing on any of the anything. But he does. He does assert. Well, he did. He's dead now, but he did assert this. The reason I say he may or may not have written the book is like, well, I'll get to that later. But the thing about it is, this map a sample was supposedly sent in for carbon dating, and it was mid-18th century. Except there are two problems. The first being, no one could actually prove that the sample sent to be tested actually came from the alleged map.
A problem.
Which is a problem. The other thing, obviously, is that even if you can prove that there's a mid-18th century map, it doesn't mean that it is an identical copy of a mid-15th century original. So, even if they had proved it, it wouldn't change anything.
Absolutely not.
So all his other evidence is stuff like, oh, there were these shipwrecks they found in early colonial Australia. Which is like, yeah, sure, but ships get wrecked all the time.
Yeah. Also, Australia's not that far.
No.
Australia is
and
not
also,
or went around Cape Horn. Or Cape of Good Hope, sorry.
No. But remember, Menzies' argument is not just the Chinese treasure fleet discovered the Americas, it is the Chinese treasure fleet literally went everywhere.
Yeah.
So in the conspiracy theorist mind, as long as you can prove one element of that, the rest of the pieces all fall into place.
Sure.
The other things are like, oh, there's, I don't know, the genetics of certain chickens or something was a bit off. And, there must have been Chinese chickens brought on ships. And I think that's one of the issues. Another one of them is that, he allegedly said, oh, there was this Polynesian island where I found a rock that had Chinese writing inscribed. And there's not even a transcription or photos or anything. So, the basis is bad. The writing process, equally dubious.
Yeah.
He allegedly saw a lot of references to the year 1421 when he was in the Forbidden City, which is interesting for a number of reasons, not least that I don't think the Forbidden City existed in 1421.
It 100% didn't.
The Ming did not move their capital to Beijing until
16th century.
Oh no, to be fair, no. 1420 is when it was finished. But the Ming did not formally move their capital north until a little bit after anyway.
Literally the year. So if the references to the year it was completed.
Well, and also, how did you know it was 1421? Because it's not like China was using the Julian/Gregorian calendar.
Math. By the power of math and wishful thinking.
Yeah. So, but allegedly he wanted to write a book about 1421, but it was awful. The publishers hated it, but they saw this little bit about the treasure fleet and how, who knows where it might have gone, and said, can you do a whole book on this? And the answer was sort of yes, but in practical terms, the majority of 1421 is ghostwritten.
Yeah. Okay.
Menzies was the ideas guy.
Love it.
And in any case, he is not the most reliable narrator for a number of reasons. He's not a historian. He could never... I don't think it was ever proved that he could actually read Chinese fluently, or even remotely close to competently. His only qualification, maritime-wise, was not an insubstantial qualification in that he was a submarine commander in the Royal Navy. Only he was a submarine commander who was kicked out of the Royal Navy in 1970 because he accidentally rammed a US Navy destroyer in Manila one year. So, let's just say his navigational skills could have been better.
Apparently. Wild.
And this may have bearing on his allegations about the navigational skills of early 15th century Ming sailors.
Sure. Yeah. But you did make an interesting comment earlier. You said that Right. The logic is basically, if it is possible, therefore it happened, and that it is possible. Can
So
you elaborate on that a
it's
little bit?
not like people have not sailed Chinese-style ships to, the Western Hemisphere and
Yeah.
back. There have been two attempts, and and actually with substantially differently sized ships,
Mm-hmm.
which shows that the limitation is not really the technology as such, and it never really was. Like, the first and best recorded, arguably, well, actually, it's not necessarily the best recorded, but the better discussed one, is the voyage of a ship called the Qing, which sailed out of Hong Kong in 1846 and ended up in New York in 1847. Granted, it was trying to get to London, and just got very off course in the Atlantic because basically junks were not copper bottomed. They had an organic sort of ablative layer to deal with fouling, which is fine if you're doing short hops around Southeast Asia and bits of the Indian Ocean. Not so good if you're trying to get across the Atlantic for several months at a time. Um, if you
Yeah.
can solve the fouling problem, it's not
Yeah.
so bad. But if you can't, you will probably end up in New York when you're planning to get to London.
Well.
Is just the fact. They also don't have a good ability to sail into the wind, which is also a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if the winds aren't ideal, yeah, you're going to have to make do. But if you know what you're doing and you know where you're going, you can make the trip. It's mostly a matter of storing up the supplies and also not having a mutiny. Because it's the Qing only called at St. Helena on its way to New York. And the reason for that pretty much is that if they had stopped ashore anywhere, several of the crew, if not all of them, would almost certainly have run away.
Bodes
Like
just
once they got
so
to New
well.
York, like a third of the crew escaped, found a missionary who had been in China, and got him to help them sue the captain for allegedly lying to them about where they were going.
Where did he say they were going?
Well, the allegation was that it was supposed to be a normal trip round the South China Sea. To be honest, this isn't very plausible because the ship was not carrying a cargo. It was genuinely supposed to be carrying, like, people and a few objects to serve as a sort of floating cultural exhibition.
Yeah.
So it's possible that they just felt like it was okay when they signed on, but they changed their mind during the voyage, which, to be fair, you can do, but it's a bit of an open question as to the extent to which they were genuinely deceived or were just finding a means of redress for upper issues.
I mean, understandable. That is a stupidly long time to be at sea in what I'm sure is not very comfortable living conditions.
No. It does make it across to London, and it's a bit of a tourist attraction for a few years.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's a guy on board who pretends that he is an official Mandarin, like he is the official representative of the Qing to the United Kingdom, and he kind of lives off this for a few years. But there is a painting of he attends the opening of oh gosh, damn it, what's his name? It's a guy called Heesing, yeah, the Great Exhibition in 1851. And this guy saying that he is Heesing, the great representative of the Qing. He attends, and on one of the paintings of the opening of the Great Exhibition in 1851, there is this Chinese Mandarin in sort of the front rank in the left, sort of as Victoria, I don't know, cuts the ribbon or whatever. Like it's
sheer
one of the most
audacity, I
fascinating
love it.
con jobs in of mid 19th century Britain. He ends up being found out and works for a tea merchant for a few years before he makes it back to China eventually.
Mm-hmm.
He ends up as some minor local strong headman who ends up being captured by the British during the Second Opium War. It all comes weirdly full circle.
I'm
So
proud of him.
the Qing was a relatively large junk. I have the book somewhere, that talks about its technical details. I'll actually hang on. I also have a PDF copy, so let me pull it up. The book to read on this is East Sails West by Stephen Davies. Let's see. No, that's not the right copy.
That's all right.
There we go. Yeah, okay. So, 165 feet long, which is...
All right.
in meters, about 50 meters long.
Yeah, that's a good
So
size ship.
it's what's described as a B-class junk, with A being the largest and I think E being the smallest. The second attempt was, well, the second demonstration was a little Taiwanese junk called the Princess Taiping. I don't know what its dimensions are. There are photos of it on Wikipedia. It's 16 meters long, so this is a much smaller vessel.
Yeah.
Is patterned after sort of Qing naval patrol vessels, and it was it set sail in, what was it, 2008? Yeah, 2008 for San Francisco. Got there, sailed back to Taiwan, and almost made it. It got rammed by an oil tanker about a couple of kilometers off from Taipei, and so everyone had to be picked up by the Coast Guard. No one died, but the ship sank.
Dang, so close.
Yeah, it was really close. But it also shows that you, again, if you know what you're doing, and you know where you're going, you can supply yourself for the trip, and the ship will take you there.
Exactly.
Even if it's a relatively small one.
And
so,
if you're able to resupply at some point, right?
That helps.
Getting to San Francisco is different from getting to the Mid-Atlantic.
It is. To be fair, I mean, the Qing, if it was planning to be able to reach London without stopping anywhere, probably had the supplies to do that as well.
Yeah.
So even resupply isn't necessarily vital, and also if, like in New World, you were just going to the Caribbean and stopping there, and it's a one-way trip, well...
Fair enough.
But we'll get into that later.
We'll get into that in a little while, because that's not the first thing we're going to do in-game. I think it's time to switch over to the main thing. The first thing we need to do is murder the shit out of our good friend Aldous Thorpe, noted conquistador.
Oh, damn. There's one really important thing to note about Gavin Menzies that I completely forgot, which
Please
is really, really
it.
important, and which is why it makes it slightly hard to even use him ironically. Which is that Gavin Menzies was really, really racist. I don't know if this surprises anyone, but he was really, really racist.
This is my surprised face.
This was particularly controversial in New Zealand because he claimed that the Maori didn't exist, basically.
Ooh, that's bad. That'd be real bad.
Yeah. There's this weird miscegenation conspiracy that actually there was a Melanesian population on New Zealand, on the two islands of Aotearoa, and that the Maori are the result of mixing between them and members of Zheng He's crew that stayed behind.
No.
Yeah.
That's real bad. Yup.
It's really bad, yeah.
Sadly, as you certainly know far better than I do, historical conspiracy theories almost always have at least some element buried not very far under the surface.
Yep.
Big yikes. Yikes.
So basically, that is why it makes it a little hard to use Menzies ironically, just because the other... It's not subtext as such, but the other stuff that he happens to have done along with it, even if you don't know about it, is kind of... you probably don't want to be giving publicity to it. Because his weird conspiracy stuff is primarily... Well, it's all weird conspiracy stuff. But the weird racial conspiracy stuff is mostly in Polynesia.
Mm-hmm.
Because remember, 1421 is not just about the Americas. It is a wide-ranging bit of nonsense. But yeah, basically.
Yep, fair warning. We might talk more about conspiracy theories later, because I need to give you a chance to show for your favorite one.
Oh dear. Oh no. Oh no. Is it that one? Is it? Are we going to have?
Not right
Drumroll,
away.
please,
We've
Tartaria.
got some other things to do first, but if we have time, we may cycle back to Tartaria. And by the way, to everyone who's showing up for the first time, welcome, Chaotic Raven. Glad you can make a stream live. My most egregious sword.
Ooh.
Niram, I spent so many hours getting good at hammer on the assumption that you guys were gonna make me just use hammer, and then you make me use sword? Come on, man. Oh, okay, we also have a redemption of an ice-cold take. So what is just the worst take you have heard about the Qing Empire? Something that everyone just accepts is wrong because it's wrong in, like, stupid ways.
Oh,
Or maybe
I
not
don't
the
know.
worst, but
The trouble is, I'm so familiar with all the actual points of contention that, like, everything is wrong in interesting ways to me now.
Alright, give us one of those then.
I'll need a moment. I'll need a moment. But
Yeah, yeah.
I'll have something. I'll have something. Because the trouble is, I keep thinking of interesting things like, oh, the Qing Empire was not a colonial entity, or that it was, unilaterally victimized by colonialism.
That still is pretty cold.
Yeah, it's pretty cold because, but it's cold in interesting ways because I think we just don't tend to think of the Qing as in terms of competing imperialism.
Yeah.
We don't think of it as an entity that is engaged in its own imperial project, and also that as an empire as opposed to a nation state. So when people talk about century of humiliation, actually that's going to be the ice cold take. Like the fundamental problem with this is who is being humiliated here. You can't have national humiliation before the development of a national consciousness.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Which, unfortunately, like the entire concept kind of rests on the idea that what you might term the dynastic humiliation of the Qing maps neatly onto the kind of national humiliation phase of the early 20th century, when that's not really how that played out, because like no one so there's an open question as to whether the Qing were always thought of by the Han Chinese as foreign conquerors,
Yeah.
or whether that was something they kind of that Han Chinese elites resurrected in the latter part of the 19th century as Qing rule began to falter, and they needed to start to blame something for everything going wrong. But like national humiliation of the early 20th century before the Qing fall, like the 1990s and the 1890s,
Yeah.
is based on the idea that the Qing are fundamentally apathetic to the plight of the Han Chinese. It's not until, like, I don't know, the 1980s even, that it was reframed as, oh, humiliations of the Qing were humiliations of China as a whole abstract concept. Which, no.
Yeah. Sorry, I am just respecking all of the things because they have, since chat has told me that I must use a sword, I'm going to make my build actually, like, decent for swords. Which, there.
Oh, yeah. Has
Since-
big hammer, uses little stabby thing.
Exactly. Also, has a very silly hat. I mean,
Ah.
I'll be honest. Where is it? This hat is also pretty silly. No, I think that one might be sillier.
Just Spawn?
This hat might be sillier.
I don't know. I think the Spawn hat is pretty silly.
They're
that
kind
you've
of
got on now.
They're kind of all silly, if we're honest, right?
Yeah.
I mean
to be fair.
that's pretty silly.
Mm.
That's extremely silly.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, no, I agree. I think
I
that
think
is
I think
that
this
is
might
the
be
word.
this. I think we'll rock out with this hat.
Or best. It's both. That's what's so brilliant.
Yeah, you vote for the luchador mask. All right. Chat seems to think the luchador mask is the correct play. So
Oh, there we go then.
let's go. All right. Next thing next. Before we play this, I do need to. There was one very relevant side quest that was mentioned somewhere. Weaver's Fen, Windward, Brightwood, Weaver's Fen. Okay. Confiscate grenades from chests and destroy Qing Shi the shark for Artificer Tathan and the Restless Shore settlement.
Oh,
Perfect.
this is where. Okay,
Perfect.
right.
Let's go. I need to actually
Okay.
turn around, go back into the theater, and fast travel.
So, we talked about this last. Well, what for me was last night, and for you was this morning.
Yes.
Um, so it is interesting that they use the name Qingshe because that means widow of Zheng.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I mean, it's not. You can't not have a guy named that because if they're not showing the actual characters, Qingshe could be any two characters. It's just so very specific, especially because Qingshe is not a standardized transliteration. Like,
Yeah.
she was active from about 1802 to 1812-ish, before the days of standardized romanization of Mandarin into English, and she was also active in a part of China that historically was not predominantly Mandarin speaking anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, if they chose Qingshe deliberately, they really did not look into what it means.
Yeah. Yeah. But then again, we'll see. We'll see if I actually have to like actually fight them. Not that there is like, not that any of the
No.
enemies have particularly strong gender dimorphism. They're pretty much like, well, if they're zombies, they're just zombies. They're zombie flavored. Yes, we will have to fight.
Oh, my favorite.
Incredible. We will have to fight whoever they think this Qing Shi is. Also, chat, this game has somehow, in the last patch, become extremely laggy. And so sometimes if I just start sliding around, it's fine, don't worry about it.
Yeah. So, someone in chat already asking who Qingshe is. So,
Yes.
she was probably born something like Shilang or something like that. Her original surname was Shi, but that has nothing to do with the Qingshe bit. The Shi bit in Qingshe means widow of, because she was married to a pirate known as Zheng Yi Sao. No, hang on, no, she was Zheng Yi Sao. She was married to a pirate. I forget what his name was now. Who was surnamed Zheng. And then he died, so she ended up marrying her stepson,
That's a big
who
yikes.
is most famously known as Chompo Tsai. Like, there is a cave in Hong Kong that is known as the Chompo Tsai cave because it was supposedly one of his hideouts.
Uh-huh.
The exact nature of her role within this pirate group is not entirely clear. Only two major sources on all of that. There's basically a memoir from a British merchant sailor who was a captive of the pirates at one stage. So that doesn't really discuss the internal organization. So we don't find out a lot about her from it. And then there is this sort of official history of sorts by a Qing official, sort of the history of the suppression of the pirates, or something along those lines, which exists in English translation. I believe the original is also extant in some form, though. And that, among other things, takes a very sort of traditionalist, conservative line, so to speak. So, alleging that, oh, a woman was in charge of this pirate fleet is the sort of thing that you would expect to be used to demonstrate the transgressiveness of the pirates and therefore the righteousness of their defeat by proper orthodox authority.
Uh-huh.
So the problem then becomes like, ironically, you know, gender dynamics and the sexism in Chinese elite writing are possibly why she has been played up in terms of her role. Like, she probably did have a significant organizational position, all things told, but we just don't know how important because we don't have anything internal
Yep.
or particularly impulsive on the matter.
Makes sense. As usual, our source record.
Doesn't she pop up in a sassy black flag in the Bahamas? Sorry?
Judges then? I don't remember. If she shows up in AC Black Flag, that would be very funny.
Oh, phew, it's someone else who is nevertheless obviously styled after her. Like, she...
Alright, well, we take those, I guess. On a technicality, I will take that.
Oops, hang on. No, please don't do it again. Yes. Okay, sorry, my internet cut out for a sec there.
Oh no, that would be very bad.
No, it's back,
Good. Good to hear.
But yeah, maybe it was my fault for looking up Assassin's Creed Black Flag. So the character in Assassin's Creed Black Flag is very obviously modeled after Qing because if you look on the wiki page for Qing, there's this illustration of her with a great big scimitar, like a curved, sort of a relatively thin-bladed curved thing. That's not an actual style of Chinese sword, but the Assassin's Creed Black Flag character has the same sword, so I think it is obviously based on the same illustration.
So, by the way, this is Qing. Chat, if you didn't know.
Okay.
Female Chinese pirate right here.
Cool.
Yep.
I'm wondering where the name even comes from if you've got this as your character design for him. I don't know.
I got nothing. I'll tell you though, there was literally no thought put into it. Right, this is the most this game could have been. Because this is extremely predictable.
Yeah.
This is an extremely predictable thing for New World to have done.
Oh
Also,
wait, actually, I wasn't looking in depth. She's actually not holding a scimitar in that illustration. She's holding a full-on sort of pirate cutlass thing. So actually, no. Assassin's Creed Black Flag just came up with the wrong sword.
You love it. And by love it, I mean, pain. Okay, so this is very bad, because I'm going to get grenaded to death if I'm not extremely careful right now.
Didn't she retire? She didn't just retire. I mean, we have to admit that Qing maritime policy was always a matter of compromise. And basically, she and the rest of what's known as the Red Flag Fleet, although calling it a singular fleet is a little bit erroneous for reasons I'm about to get into. Like, the fleet consisted of a lot of smaller sub-confederations within the broader confederation, whose individual heads and captains were sort of gradually bought off by the Qing over the course of a few years, until eventually the principal Red Flag Fleet sort of capitulated as well. But like, this capitulation was kind of a win for the pirates, because it was basically the Qing saying, hey, we will just recognize you as being officially part of the Navy if you just stop pirating.
I mean, that's fair. I like that strategy.
It's a fair a gig pirate's perspective, from the Qing perspective, it's like, oh, I mean, from the Qing perspective as well, oh, it works. But,
Exactly.
for anyone saying, oh, we smashed the pirates to bits, yeah, it's not quite.
Not great. Not really useful for that job, but meh. That's not the only way, or I think even the best way to deal with that particular issue. So,
Yeah.
the fact that they were able to just pay them off, honestly, probably better.
Weird. Well, sorry, I don't want to call it weird romanticism. Yeah. I mean, it's just that there's a lot of weird romanticism also around Qing, which is understandable, but also, like, to quote Mitchell and Webb, but pirates are the baddies.
What?
Like,
No.
Qing ran a gigantic protection racket. That's kind of how the pirates worked. They would go up to coastal villages and say, pay us money. Or, well, that's a very nice village you have there.
It would be a shame if something happened
Would
to
be
it.
a shame if something would have happened to it. It's not the sort of thing you go, oh, girl power.
Okay, but what if we could girl boss pirates?
Yeah, exactly.
Girl boss protection rackets. It's fine.
Yeah. Also, she was almost certainly involved in early opium smuggling, so that's also another thing.
That's a whole thing. Don't want.
It's a whole complicated thing where, like, you can simultaneously say that, the extent of the issue in some ways is deeply exaggerated by, ironically, Western paternalism of the late 19th century, while still being, the people doing it did it despite having a general sense that it was not a moral thing to do. Like that's where it gets really complicated, because not to both sides it, but it is kind of an everyone sucks here and not a obvious NTA YTA kind of thing.
Yeah. I believe. It's sometimes okay for it to, actually, it's usually okay in history for it to be everyone sucks here.
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
So, the thing with the Joe period thing, and I know we'll get to it later, but I saw it in
Yes.
chat and I thought I might address it.
Yes, let's do it.
I am not fully convinced that this is supposed to be the Joe as in, the
The dynasty?
first millennium BCE.
Yes.
I think it is a mix of kind of two things, because the way we use the term dynasty to refer to Chinese states in English is genuinely needlessly confusing and arguably incorrect.
Yeah.
I suspect there are two things involved. The first is that the Tang era Empress Wu Zetian, who briefly declared her own state, known as Zhou, may have been part of the inspiration. Also possible because if Gavin Menzies is involved, the fact is that the Ming rulers were from the Zhu family, and Zhu to Zhou is not that hard of a deliberate link,
Yep.
is my suspicion.
I agree with both of those statements, but counteract
So
with the
I
fact
think-
that, I will just counteract with the, this is New World, they didn't think that hard.
Well, I think more importantly, she is apparently supposed to be surnamed Zhou, possibly? I mean, actually, to be fair, if she's something like Zhou Taiying, that's... You can possibly say that that is a posthumous temple name, and given that she's supposed to be undead, yeah, maybe she is using a posthumous name of some kind. It would make sense. But if that's her actual birth name, well, the thing is that the term dynasty, the way it's used in English, corresponds to a term in Chinese that kind of means court. So
Yeah.
you can see how that became dynasty in the sense of a royal dynasty, a family of people sharing a surname ruling consecutively. But it
Yeah.
possibly should have been better translated as state.
Uh-huh.
And that's what it or effectively means. So
Alright.
I'm willing to believe that they genuinely just misunderstood and thought that, oh, the Ming dynasty means that everyone was surnamed Ming. No, they were not. It was Zhu.
Okay.
So I suspect that they wanted to invent some fictional state and may or may not have taken inspiration
Took down Qing
from
shop,
Wu
did you?
Zetian and or from the Ming, but also like they just went with Zhou
Sad
because
to
it's
say,
I don't know,
Pagan
she's
had
just
less
your
exactly
average
you'll find
Zhou.
in Solitude
Ha ha ha. There's no need to laugh.
Yep. Now, next thing, I think, having had that lovely digression, we'll come back to the question of the Zhou dynasty, whether or not they're actually the Zhou dynasty later. I just want to point out, while we're waiting, trying to get a group together here for the adventure underneath the waterfall. Because I do need to find random players in here in order to fight this game. Or in order to proceed with the main story. So, I'm gonna quick put that in. Wall Street Depths, and we'll see if anyone shows up. I want to point out a couple of things in the documents from Qing. Praise and praise and praise and praise and praise and praise and praise to Providence. Oh no, the camera did that. So that means, looks like probably Jeremy may have disconnected by virtue of being very far away. So, hello chat. We are going to take a look at what happened here. Alright, we're going to have to bring the call back up, I think. Yep. Let's try that again. Hello.
Yes, hello.
We are recovering everything. Chat, don't go anywhere. We'll be back in a second. Everything perished. And we're back. Look at that. We return. No one saw a thing. There were no technical difficulties whatsoever.
Basically, I'm also following the stream as it happens, so I'm not gonna
Yep.
be too and
Oh,
ooh, I
right.
mean that frames the hammer quite nicely.
It does, isn't it? But there is no.
There we go.
I am afraid we might have no activity for like people online right now, which is a big problem with MMO design. How can you complete the main story and go fight an English conquistador if no one is online to do the raid? It's a big problem. And unfortunately, it seems like we have... We'll hang out for a couple more minutes and just chat, and then if not, then we will abandon it, and we'll just go over to Ebonscale Reach. Also, Chad, are you playing Go Fish?
So
Yeah.
I am going to say that it looks like this is obviously based on a somewhat fictionalized version of the Ming. Not least the ship. The ship designs of like no earlier than the 14th century.
Yep.
So I'm going to say that they just went with Zhou because they genuinely didn't realize that there was a meaningful thing. Because also, I mean, when we talk about Zhou dynasty, I mean, to be fair, the latter latter 2/3 of it did not meaningfully exist anyway.
Look at him.
For whatever reason, I thought that it had actually been some kind of allusion to the Qing conquest, that this was some kind of weird nativist thing. It is not, which is
Yep.
fine for what it's worth, I guess. At least they didn't go that route.
Hooray!
But I mean, an interesting thing about Wu Zetian is the way that she was. So, okay, this is going to be a long story.
yeah, let's talk Wu Zetian, and in the meantime, I will pull up the two stories we've actually got for
Yeah.
Joe, what's her
So
Tai Ying, as background.
this is not my area at all. Like, this is over 1,000 years too early for me to really be particularly up to speed with. But like the thing about Wu Zetian that makes her very hard to discuss is like the general vilification of female power in sort of Chinese elite sources, which are, I mean, to kind of be expected. We've talked about that with the piracy earlier. Um, what's interesting to me is the time that she was kind of um, appropriated into this Chinese nativist novel in a complicated way. So there's this article, if anyone's interested, called a Connecticut Yankee in the Court of Wu Zetian,
What?
Mark Twain and Wong Chin Fu,
What?
which is about 19th century English language novels and about potential influences on Mark Twain by a first generation Chinese immigrant who wrote under the name Wong Chin Fu.
Please drop that in
I was
chat.
talking
That sounds
about
amazing.
And it was talking about this novel that the guy had written, which, quote unquote, challenged white nativism. Which I'm sure it does. The trouble is, I think the author was a little bit too obsessed with the challenging white nativism bit and presumed that the novel challenged racism as a whole, as opposed to being a slightly different form of it. Because, like, it is very Han nativist. It is a novel about this sort of virtuous prince overthrowing Wu Zetian, in which Wu Zetian's principal allies are Central Asian Tatars.
Oof. Oof,
And
that's
Wu
not
Zetian
good.
here is kind of very obviously a stand-in for Cixi. And so the Central Asian Tatar thing is obviously a reference to the Manchus by extension. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's...
Yeah, that's real gross.
Yeah. So like, she, like... It's a combination of powerful women and also, you know, foreign Qing rule, which is inherently foreign and therefore impossible to ever accept ever. But also, we should vilify the Manchus utterly. You know, it's ungood.
That's very ungood. And regrettably, chat, it appears that we will not, in fact, get to punch a Conquistador with a sword, because no one is online. Because this game has gone from, despite multiple rounds of server mergers, still has low population all over the place, and is down to like 30,000 people playing it total.
A game about zombies and it's dead. How ironic. Anyway.
So, instead, we are somewhat underleveled, so we cannot do any side quests, but we can run around and hopefully gain a level in Ebonscale Reach, our
Hooray!
generic fantasy Chinese area.
Yes.
Hooray.
Due to internet quality issues, I mostly see pixels on the live feed, so I'm just gonna have to watch the stream and see things a few minutes out of sync. But
That is fine. Hopefully it'll be a few seconds out of sync instead of a few minutes.
yeah.
Chat, if the lag is more than about 30 seconds, I will drop something right now in order to give you a sync point. If it takes more than 30 seconds for you to hear me say that from when I dropped a word in chat, please do refresh the stream, because that should solve the sync issues.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of...
And welcome to
What if we did generic fantasy China except in the Caribbean? There's nothing too objectionable, I guess.
Also,
So far.
the
So far.
first NPC that we walk down here, who is the magistrate of the entire place, is named Constance Redridge.
Interesting. Okay.
And is wearing a coat and a cloth Euro style cap. Also,
So
is
is this
super white. Ah,
Okay.
immense.
Okay.
Love it.
Cool. Cool.
Cool.
Right.
Greetings. I am Ting Long.
No. Look, I once served the Zhou dynasty, but now I am proudly independent.
Okay.
Quite barefacedly. Also,
Okay.
her shoulder plate looks like it's.
I'll have to wait for the stream,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
of course. But it's some kind of like horned demon, which looks to me more yokai than anything that I am aware of Chinese. Also, that's a wooden maul, not a smithing hammer. But that doesn't matter. Hammers are hammers.
Yeah, there's hammer. Hammer is a hammer is a hammer. If you hold a hammer for long enough, everything starts to look like a poorly thought out MMO.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is... God, every time I'm reminded of just how wild this is.
Certainly interesting.
Hey, look. The, generic religious faction has a... What? Imperial Confucian scholar hat?
Doesn't actually look like any hat I'm familiar with.
Okay.
Aren't they supposed to have a little cylindrical bit?
I mean, it's got the curvy bit, and that's all anyone recognizes.
Yeah.
Let's check on that.
Is this some sort of holy grail thing, or no? Actually, that's a fist, isn't it?
It's a fist. It's the Covenant. They're Crusaders. The current head of them is literally a Templar.
Oh.
So
I don't think I have anything more to say than just. Oh.
Yeah. And the comment for the shoulder plate earlier being potentially reminiscent of a Nuo mask. Do those have horns? Like, that's the big thing that's making me really suspicious, is that there were very prominent horns on that shoulder plate mask.
It's true, but they tend to just stick vertically up, though. It tends not to be forward protrusions.
Yeah. Again, I still think it's just a yokai
But
mask.
it's true, yeah,
because...
there are horned masks. Yeah, there are horned opera masks. Why
Okay.
you would wear one as a shoulder guard?
Oh.
How on earth you made that with a gigantic wooden mallet?
Oh boy. You know things are real bad when the Covenant who owns the place has
Does not pay rent.
Did not pay rent. Yeah, server population's doing badly. Ledger of Favors. Magistrate Redridge, no outstanding balances. Survivalist Hopkins, copy of the Epic of Gilgamesh lent.
Cool.
Hold up. When does it get translated into English? Hold up. This is
2371 when Picard relays it to a Temerian.
Yeah, okay. So full translation of the Epic of Gilgamesh is 1875.
Religion is when you do holy war, it's that easy. I mean, you know, I study a holy war.
Yes, please. You know, please go ahead right now. I want to hear more about the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom.
The typing, I mean, but if I start, I'll never stop. This is my jam.
Let's give the
the potted summary in effect is that the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom are the most substantial challenge to Qing rule in the 1850s, but also not the only one. And so, what I would argue is a big problem with discussions of how the whole thing gets started is that they tend to look at the Taiping in isolation and not as actually a particularly, as simply the most substantial example of a pretty empire-wide phenomenon.
Okay.
The long and short of it is that the founder of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, a guy called Hong Xiuquan, was an aspiring scholar. He had failed several times at the provincial tier of the civil service exams, although he had passed it with flying colours at the district tier, and eventually had basically a nervous breakdown combined with serious illness that led him to have fever dreams that caused him to have some kind of vision.
Okay.
There are books that assert that we have more certainty about it than I would say that we do. I don't want to throw shade at Jonathan Spence here, because I don't think he was necessarily wrong as such. His is a valid interpretation, but it's also not mine.
Okay.
Because I ended up doing my undergrad thesis work on this, and my view is that the visions are elaborated on so much over time, and we have so few early records of them that we just don't know what he saw. It's
Fair.
simple.
Safe to say he has
Whatever it was
visions
he
of
saw.
some flavor.
Yes, whatever it was he saw, he eventually came to conclude that he was the younger brother of Jesus, and therefore the second son of the Abrahamic God, and had a mission to cleanse China of some unspecified evil, which he eventually did specify as the Manchus, actually.
Nice. Love it.
Because we've got to have that.
Yeah, we can't possibly have it without it eventually going wildly off the rails.
No. And what ends up happening is that he ends up gathering followers from most from the rural Guangxi region. Again, there's a lot of focus on the idea that he recruited mainly from Hakkars. That's not entirely true. Like that it may have been that the Hakka minority sort of subgroup whom he was a part of were targeted particularly earlier on, but on a broader level, he seems to have just recruited anyone who would join, and by the later stages of the 1840s, when he's still kind of setting up what will become the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, which at this stage is merely a group known as the God-worshipping Society, it seems to have become a more pan-Han anti-Manchu movement that didn't really care about subgroup distinctions within the Han.
Okay, sure.
Probably.
That checks
You know, I
out.
think it's interesting that they decided to bring bamboo shoots over.
They sure did.
Except we don't see it growing
trees.
anywhere.
And
Uh,
weird, like,
Yeah.
pseudo... It's like a palm tree with bamboo pretending to be bamboo.
Okay. I will accept this and go back to where I was.
Yes.
Like, the Taiping had started out in sort of the southern hinterland of China in Guangxi. They migrate out of that, basically. As soon as the Qing really start to try and squeeze them, they go on this grand exodus until they reach the Yangtze, and then go downriver until they reach the old Ming capital at Nanjing. They set that up as their own capital, the heavenly capital, quote-unquote, and they basically try and set up a stable base there until, over the course of about 10 years, they are eventually pushed back.
Okay.
This is a long story made very short, but I mean, there's a lot of controversies over to what extent did sort of existing Qing forces play a part in this? How vital was the role of provincial militias led by sort of Confucian scholar gentry, and also to what extent was Western intervention A, on the cards for the Taiping, and B, vital to the eventual success of the Qing? Because there's a self-congratulatory colonial narrative in which Charles Gordon, who is possibly more famous for dying at Khartoum the day before the relief column arrived in 1884, leading about 2,000 troops, single-handedly won the war for the Qing.
Wow.
And then there's this obvious counter-reaction where, maybe we should consider the several 100,000 troops mobilized by the Qing scholar gentry. But more recently, Stephen Platt has made an interesting case for saying that, if the Taiping had not... If foreign neutrality had been actual neutrality, the Taiping probably would have been in a much better position. So, Like,
Uh-huh.
the economic and naval strangulation of the Taiping was actually very significant, is Stephen Platt's argument. So there is actually a kind of synthesis position in the Hegelian sense, where it's not that the West isn't important, but it is important in ways distinct from the way that the self-congratulatory narrative put it.
Yeah. By the way, we did find bamboo. They call it a young tree.
Cool.
They also call the palm trees young trees. Also, a tiger.
Bear in mind, bamboo is a form of grass.
Yes. It's just a fast-growing grass, but it's called a young tree. It's not even called a bamboo tree. It's just... It's indistinguishable from this palm tree right here.
Young tree, yeah. Actually, but I learned stuff about bamboo biology in the past couple of days when I read an answer on Ask Historians about pandas. Like, how does the panda become a cultural symbol in China? Because it may surprise people to learn that we don't know... Well, sorry, not that we don't know. Like, there are no depictions of pandas in pre-20th century Chinese art.
Really?
Yep.
What?
Because, like, the panda is an animal that is native to a relatively small part of Sichuan that is very sparsely populated, and
Fair.
also inhabited in large part by pre-Han indigenous peoples. So it wasn't until the mid-19th century when you have these European naturalists coming in and asking for them to be shot to get taken back to Europe that there's interest in them from outside the area in any respect. Which
Okay.
in turn leads to domestic interest in the early 20th century in China, that then leads into the communist period with, there's a mixture of a genuine interest in nature conservation, because the Communist Party basically has this line that the sciences are vital to the modernization and liberation of China, and as part of that, well, biology is pretty important, and so animal conservation is pretty important, as long as you're not, a sparrow or a rat or a fly.
Yeah, understandable.
So there's genuine interest in conserving a large number of species like pandas. The other thing with pandas is that they happen to be kind of quote-unquote quintessentially Chinese in that they only exist in China.
Yeah.
They're not that related to the red panda, it's just that for some reason Europeans used the same name for both and needed to distinguish between the the greater panda and the lesser panda. The second thing is they're kind of a quote-unquote living fossil, which makes them weird and interesting. And the third thing is, because they have no pre-modern associations, it means that you can impart any imagery onto them that you want. There's no feudal corruption, so to speak, and there's no existing cultural cachet, so you can just construct one from scratch. So, in a sense, what makes the panda so significant is that it's an emblem of the modern Chinese nation. And all three of those words are specific and matter here. Modern because there is no prior association, Chinese because it's so quintessentially local, although that does get into the thorny ethnic issue of, well, yes, there is this, modern Chinese claim of grand multi-ethnic nationhood, but, like, the English call the Scots British, but, kind of issue.
Yeah.
Just because
Of
your
course.
national concept technically includes these indigenous peoples doesn't mean, per se, that you're not still operating on a mono-ethnic norm. And then nation is significant because it's a representation of the national concept and not of the state. Elena Sungster has written the book on the cultural history of the panda. And her view is that, her argument is that what made the panda such a long-lived symbol, despite being incredibly significant as a motif during the Cultural Revolution, is that because it is emblematic of the nation and not of the state or the government. It's not something that could be tied to any specific factional tendency within the Cultural Revolution period, and it was not tainted by association with the Cultural Revolution either. This all comes back to bamboo because in 1976, which is the year that Zhou Enlai and Mao died, and also there was the great big earthquake at Tanshan, there was a panda famine.
What do you mean a panda
Because
famine?
in several large parts of the sort of habitable area for pandas, there was what's known as bamboo flowering. Like when bamboo flowers, it then dies,
Yeah.
which happens on a regular cycle. But because bamboo is actually a sort, it's like that there's that great big quaking aspen that's this giant clonal colony. Like a lot of areas of bamboo are functionally clonal colonies, so they all operate on the same cycle. So when one of them starts flowering, that's because all of them are flowering. It's not some sort of blight-like thing where they're sort of causing each other to flower, but it just so happens that they will all reach the same point in their life cycle simultaneously. And so that will kill entire areas of bamboo. And so that, in 1976, caused a panda famine.
That checks out.
There was also one in 1983, although because they were already watching out for them after the incident in 1976, where it took months to really work out what was going on, that was responded to much more quickly, and also internationally. They solicited donations both nationally and globally. I don't remember how much they raised, which is ironic because I read the book on this like 2 days ago. But they raised a decent amount of money. And you know, in the grand scheme of the Sino-American détente, one of the big parts of that was Nancy Reagan giving Deng Xiaoping a $13,000 check from the American school children.
I'm gonna die here. Sorry. Don't mind me. Don't mind me. 21
Just
HP
gonna-
cream. We're good. Apologies, was a bit busy by the whatever the hell this dude is. Okay, now I'm gonna die here.
Big Zombo. You can still be revived. Yeah. If only the game
be-
had players.
That'd be great. Yeah, exactly. If only there was players and like a group. But oh boy, there was a lot
Oh,
interesting
actually, I
that you
feel
said, but I was also a bit distracted by whatever the heck was going on there. Good Sir Bear. The reason I was walking under the water, by the way, is because this game didn't program swimming. And not
Of
only did it not
course
program
not.
swimming, it didn't. You still have your footstep animations on the surface of the water wherever you are.
Let's see. I have right.
Anyway, what do you say we go back there and actually try and take a look at the enemies?
Sorry, I'm just replying to something
Yeah,
in
no
chat
worries.
because someone was asking what the name of the book was.
Yep. Sounds
As for
good.
pandas and mythical status, it's interesting in that there is a creature known as. Oh, hang on, I'm gonna have to check the. I'm gonna have to check the tone on this. What is the tone? Right. So there is a creature known as the Moor, which for a while was one of 3 possible candidates for what the pre-modern name of the panda was in Chinese texts. Well, unless people used all 3. The complicated thing is, so in 2012, David Harper looked at a large number of texts and concluded that insofar as pandas were ever actually being described, that was indeed the term. The term Moor was used for the panda. But
Okay.
also that a lot of people who had never seen one drew descriptions of them. And drew from the written descriptions because there were no artistic depictions,
Yeah.
and also that there was a convergence of the actual panda with a a sort of mythical invented creature, this quadripartite thing with I think the head and the paws of a wolf, the head of a wolf, the spots of the paws of a wolf, the tail of a cow, the spots of a leopard, and the trunk of an elephant. Which is interesting because it leads to this one kind of standardized depiction that looks kind of like a tapir.
Yeah? Yeah, that does sound like a
Which is
tapir.
interesting because there are actually tapirs in what's now Malaysia.
Yeah?
And also in what's now Indonesia. And so sometimes it's been suggested that, oh, this is actually a slightly garbled depiction of a tapir, and that is why Moor is now the Chinese word for tapir, because the French zoologists who found the Moor in sort of Chinese natural history texts and also connected them with the Malayan tapir presumed, oh, Chinese natural histories wouldn't include legendary creatures, so it must be something real, so it must just be a version of the tapir. So they use this character and say, well, this character must be the Chinese character for a tapir that they just don't use nowadays because there are no tapirs in China that they encounter regularly. And this gets transmitted to Japan when Japan is looking at absorbing a large amount of Western writing. And then this migrates back into China when Japanese text influence Chinese ones. So, like, pandas aren't a mythical creature in pre-modern China, but they are conflated with a pre-modern creature, with a mythical creature, to such an extent that people were legitimately confused into believing that they were tapirs.
Wow. How are you hitting me, though? Sorry, I'm in a shoot-off. Then we're gonna actually try and take a look at this sniper and how he's dressed. Because, oh boy.
I bet it will be great.
Oh, totally. Promise.
I mean, there's an interesting thing. We're talking about sort of pandas and international recognition that, the World Wildlife Fund started with the panda as its logo. Interestingly enough, there was a lot of smuggling of both live and dead pandas out of China, particularly during the war years, because it just so happens that Sichuan was, of course, part of Chiang Kai-shek's region.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah, it was possible to do that. In fact, one of these, two of these pandas were actually diplomatic gifts to the US by Song Mei-ling, who was Chiang's wife, quote-unquote, first lady of China, according to the US press. So, that had driven interest in the panda even before there was significant efforts at sort of panda publicity in China.
Oh, and now I'm getting chased by an alligator too. Run away. I just want to look at the people.
Uh-oh.
Oh god.
Just want to look at clothes.
Exactly. Not get attacked by alligators. Wanted to get in a shooting match and then not die.
The other advantage of using the Panda, of course, is that it's black and white, so if you're going to print it a lot,
Yeah, it's really convenient.
it does make it easier. Yeah. I've told this joke before, but what's black and white and red all over? A panda during the Cultural Revolution.
Ha!
Tragically, Pandas Are Red is just a chapter title, it wasn't an actual slogan, but imagine if it was.
That would be such a good slogan.
Like, there was a phase during the Cultural Revolution when some elements of the Chinese Communist government tried to change traffic lights because red was the color of progress, and so go will now be red.
What?
You can imagine that the accident rate went through the roof during the months when that was the case.
Yes. That is an incredible and extremely bad idea.
Yeah.
By the way, apparently,
Yeah.
the Zhou dynasty, when they left, apparently also brought peacocks with them.
Cool. Why not?
And also all the I'm killing all the peacocks for being horny on Maine.
Oh, that'll do. I mean, why not?
I mean, why else would they have all their plumes out? It's definitely not because this game is just reskinning turkeys.
That's right, there's no peahens. You're killing the last of the peacocks, that's it.
Yes. But no, KJ, they are making peacock sounds. That is just what they sound like. It's just, they're all horny and there are no peahens. And therefore they all deserve to die. Don't take that out of context, Jeff.
Yeah, fair enough. So I guess we should just talk about Qing colonialism now.
Yeah,
Why not?
let's talk about that, because clearly our aesthetics are solidly that.
There are many, many layers to this. Like,
Yeah.
so many. I already talked about Qing colonialism a bit when I was last on, because we talked about Taiwan, which, if anyone here wasn't there and or does not know, Taiwan was not even vaguely within the Chinese orbit until the end of the 16th century. And it was not substantially settled, if we want to use the euphemistic term, by Han Chinese people until well into the 17th century. Like, there is a period in which it's being used as a safe haven for sort of anti-Qing rebels, but like there is a kind of a phase of coastal expansion in the 18th century and aggressive hinterland colonialism in the 19th, which it is worth noting was explicitly compared to American colonization of the Great Plains by some of those involved. So
that feels bad.
like it's not just, oh, let's conveniently use the same term for both. No, genuinely, people at the time were calling it a colonial project on Taiwan. The complicated issue with discussing Qing colonialism and imperialism is that it happens in so many areas. And also that it is so layered, because there are questions over whether the Qing state itself is a colonial entity, quote-unquote, insofar as it is still an entity of foreign origin. It emerges... the thing with the Qing is that we often say, oh, the Qing period begins in 1644.
Yo.
The Qing period in China begins in 1644. The Qing state as an entity came into existence in 1636, and it did so in Manchuria. Or what is sometimes termed Manchuria. It's a name that is complicated because, like, officially, even to the Qing, it was the Northeast. But, you know, it is the Northeast in relation to and or of China, which makes it a little awkward of a term to use unqualified, so that's why I'm still using Manchuria here. Anyway,
Sure.
like, it emerges outside of China proper, and as some have argued, especially Nicola de Cosmo, there is no particular reason to believe that conquering China was their raison d'etre from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's entirely possible, indeed he would argue quite likely, that the conquest of China was something that happened because there was an opportunity for it when the Ming just straight up collapsed in 1644.
Yeah. That makes sense.
And there is very little reason that the Qing would have believed themselves capable of fighting a unified Ming on their own turf. So the Qing are a state that develop all of their mechanisms of rule before they have even arrived in China proper. And they are also a state with a substantial sort of warrior administrative caste, the Banners, with ethnic division into Manchus, Mongols, and quote-unquote martial Han, i.e. Han Chinese in the Liaodong region who had been pressed into service but were not enslaved,
Right.
which made up quite a lot of the banners, actually.
Right.
So there's this complicated thing where, yeah, the Qing are multi-ethnic, but there's also a question of to what extent they operate on a certain degree of what Mark Elliott likes to term ethnic sovereignty. It's really complicated because there is more than one view on it, and it's all very unsettled. Like, the view that the Qing are kind of a culturally null entity that are just will just go with whatever cultural motifs suit a particular context and don't have a specific ethnic preference. That's sort of Pamela Crossey's argument. Mark Elliott's argument is that actually the Qing do have a very coherent concept of Manchu ethnicity, and that they believe the preservation of that as a coherent identity is vital. And one of his students, David Porter, has argued that the banner system was not as ethnocentric as Elliott argues, even if, yes, there is still an ethnic sovereignty element to it. It's all horrifically complicated, but the long story short is it is very hard to avoid the fact that the Qing, whatever their origins, still maintained a certain degree of preferential treatment for a particular inner circle with a certain ethnic dimension to it.
Sure.
So that then gets layered on top of a largely state-sanctioned Han colonialism in certain regions, and state-resisted Han colonialism in others.
Interesting.
The Qianlong Emperor does not buy into the idea of acculturation as a good thing. He does believe that it can happen, but he doesn't believe that it should. And so he broadly does not try and... He broadly clamps down on Han expansion on Taiwan, and he maintains pretty much existing local systems in places like Xinjiang and Tibet.
Okay.
His father, the Young Emperor, was not quite the same. He did believe that it was a good thing, and so he's responsible for quite a lot of aggressive colonialism, particularly in southwest China and on Taiwan. Where you have, I don't want to say, how do I put it? Polities which to the Qing are less quote unquote coherent and quote unquote more primitive, as opposed to places like peoples like the Mongols, whom the Qing can see a certain sort of commonality with.
Okay.
And so this involves a lot attempts to erode indigenous sovereignty, expand Chinese land holdings, and especially to basically place Han settlements between indigenous ones to break up the possibility of sort of indigenous state formations cohering more strongly. The Qianlong Emperor pulls back on this, but in the longer run, after he dies, and as you end up with a run of emperors who are more conciliatory towards Han interests, so to speak, turn up, this all gets quite eroded in many regards. Xinjiang is arguably aside from Taiwan, which has always... had always been a bit more colonized than the rest. Xinjiang was the first region to see substantial Han colonialism. This begins in the 1820s.
Yeah.
It is ostensibly a security thing. Like, the thing they're doing is that they are moving farmers in because they believe that Han farmers will be more loyal to the Qing than sort of indigenous Turkic Muslim elites. Even if they may not be... even if they're not as loyal to the Qing in China proper as the Qing would hope, the Han will see themselves as having more commonality with the Qing state if they're put in a less familiar environment, essentially.
Okay.
The Qing don't end up doing substantial Han colonization in Tibet for the most part, although they do end up doing it in Mongolia in the first decade of the 20th century, which leads into the Mongolian Declaration of Independence in 1911, which almost becomes the big crisis of that year until China does the same later on, and the Qing collapses and Mongolia goes, haha,
Yeah.
you can't really stop us now.
Understand.
think one of the most substantial examples and substantially successful was in Manchuria, although that gets complicated. The Qing had tried to prevent Han settlement there for quite a while, but the Russian annexation of large parts of Outer Manchuria in the 1860s, as well as the rise of Japan, meant that the Qing had a growing interest in trying to consolidate control over it, and that was achieved largely through permitting Han resettlement. Permitting Han resettlement to go into Manchuria.
Yo.
Particularly, well, I mean, the other major crisis, which I think I alluded to when we talked about when we were on the Taiwan subject, but which actually fits in with some of the stuff you've been doing on Iceland,
Yo.
is that there was a bit of an ecological crisis.
Yeah. Love them.
So, the Manchurian economy had been sustained largely by a state monopoly on ginseng. Well, not quite a monopoly on ginseng, but a heavy duty on ginseng, which is a medicinal herb.
Yo.
And also basically a monopoly charter granted to sorghum liquor brewers.
Yo.
But mostly it was the ginseng duties.
Okay.
Now, this was great while it worked, but the trouble is, basically, they didn't want the market flooded. So, I think during the 18th century, it was officially stated that it was the official position of the state that only wild ginseng was medicinally effective. Cultivated ginseng didn't work.
Sure.
But what this means is that you just have a lot of people harvesting ginseng.
Uh-huh.
And eventually, you will be harvesting it faster than it grows naturally.
Quite soon you'll be harvesting it faster than it grows naturally.
Yep, and so it took a while, but it did eventually happen. In the 1840s and 50s, the ginseng industry collapses.
Yo.
And so Manchuria does not have an economy anymore, or at least doesn't have a state fisc anymore.
Uh-huh.
And 1850s, what's happening there? Taiping. Oh no, the Qing state does not have the money to directly subsidize Manchuria back to some degree of economic stability.
Yeah.
And so, in conjunction with the Russian annexation in the 1850s, in the late 1850s and early 1860s, granting even greater imperative to that, it's not just security, but also economics, which is leading them to go, right, we just need to put more people here and just transition this all to an agrarian economy. Which interestingly leads into border issues with Korea. Like, the modern Sino-Korean border is a product of the collapse of the ginseng industry and the establishment of agricultural colonies on the Yalu River.
Uh-huh.
So it's all a very multifaceted kind of thing.
Yo. Definitely, and... I mean, with the Qing collapse, obviously... I mean, I think even well before the Qing collapse, its big, like, international attempt to compete with European colonialism was a failure, which is not intrinsically a bad thing.
Oh,
Anyway.
we talk about it in a sec, although there was a question here about China and Tibet. So I'm not a 20th century historian. I could not really tell you what happens in Tibet after 1911.
Yo.
But Qing history in Tibet is really interesting, and it has been called colonial in an intellectual sense. By what's his name? It's not Ulrich Terwald. One sec while I find the name of it. There we go, Max Oitman. There's just a lot of people with German surnames who write about Qing in Eurasia, and it just starts to get confusing after a while.
Immense. Powerful energy right there.
So Max Oitman's Forging the Golden Urn goes into this in depth. Tibet has had a complicated relationship to China proper. It was a major rival to the Tang Empire, and a division of the Tibetan people known as the Tanguts established the state of Western Xia in, I believe, what's now Gansu, which was one of the early conquests of Genghis Khan. So there's a history of that, and Tibet ultimately comes under the remit of the Great Yuan when the Mongol Empire divides into its 4 substantial portions. That doesn't make it part of China, quote unquote, though. The Ming have a nominal presence in Tibet, but like the Ming have a nominal presence everywhere, and it means absolutely nothing. The Qing are the first. The Qing therefore become the second state with a substantial amount of control over Tibet in any meaningful sense, which all ties into their great war with the Dzungars, which draws them into Central Asia in the first place. I know this is kind of turning into the meme of, the historian says that it all begins like 500 years before the event actually happens, but we do need to go into the backstory of this event.
All right, then maybe we can
At the
wait
same
on
time,
that.
the Qing are in-
Maybe we can wait on that for a bit. Well, we take a look at the
Sure.
thing that we can actually going on screen for a change. Did he just eat himself off a cliff?
It's just-
Did he just eat
it's
himself off a cliff? Look at him go.
I think he did. I think you beat him now.
No,
Oh,
he's in
no,
the
he's still-
swamp.
So from what I gather, he's a human Beyblade.
Yes. But also, right, this whole complex is called the Water Shrine, because apparently there are shrines for the 5 elements.
Okay.
At least according to a document. Right, 5 elements: wood, metal, fire, water, and earth. So, no, sorry.
Okay.
There is actually a... Because there's an air shrine, which means that they're doing some spooky stuff. They're doing
Okay, so
something
that's,
weird, because if we look on the map up here...
Yeah, those in the
uh,
document, those are the correct 5 elements.
on the map,
So this is Avatar: The Last Airbender.
this is Avatar: The
levels
Last
of element.
Airbendering it.
Oh, well, yeah.
But before we get to whatever that is, we'll go there next. But I want to take a look at,
Can you chop a tree on top of him, and will that cause damage?
No,
or
sadly.
is that kind of environmental gameplay not really worked in?
The tree just passed through with
Shame.
no breaking. But I do want to take a look at like this pagoda area because like what's actually going on here? Right, because I've seen we've got this giant drum space and then the summoner that they're using here has this like weird the same like quasi Imperial official hat that we saw on the like Covenant, the NPC in town.
Yeah.
So I'm not really sure what the heck is going on here. Just that this dude is nonsense.
Yeah.
Oh heck.
I have no idea what's going on because, I mean, elemental shrines are not really a thing.
Understandable.
To be fair, my familiarity with Chinese religious architecture is not brilliant, but this is more of a kind of, I don't know, a private residence's garden complex.
Okay,
than
that's what I'm looking for. It's just what on
An
earth is
actual
actually going? Because I
religious-
genuinely have no clue.
Yeah, the thing with, I mean, from what I understand, I mean, a standard Buddhist temple is kind of a series of courtyards.
Yo,
It's not this kind of open plan thing. This would not look out of place as someone's garden.
right? You'd love to see it.
And you do have gardens attached to temples,
Okay.
but it would not be the actual structure of worship and services, so to speak.
Sounds good. So, do you know anything about the giant drum here? What the heck it purports to be?
Giant drums do exist. I mean, temples
Yeah.
will. The Chinese Buddhist temples will have 2 towers, I think, between a couple of the courtyards. Yeah, it's near the main courtyard. One for a drum and one for a bell. So it's not like. So if there is a bell tower, they might be deliberately drawing on that a bit, even if the overall is a bit garbled.
There's no bell
So
tower.
if on the opposite side there is a bell, but if there is not a bell, No.
Fair.
Like the drum tower and the bell tower are usually identically constructed. It's just that one has the drum and the other has the bell.
Makes sense. So yeah, they feel like they're like, oh, giant drum, that's a thing, and we went no further. Last thing I wanted to point out: the dragon, the random dragon head statue.
Cool. Gotta have those.
Just because, I'm like 98% sure this isn't from anything except Dark Souls.
Wouldn't shock me.
But
Oh, Human Beyblade has.
I can see that I am
respawned.
so far out. Oh, he never died. I cannot kill this guy
Ah.
because I am not good. But like, this doesn't even look in the right ballpark to me. Nothing about this dragon head looks even remotely plausible to me.
It is metallurgically odd as well.
Yo, this
I don't know how you would make it.
by killing a dragon, I think.
Well, explains everything.
I think that's the only realistic way you could look at making this.
Hmm. Yeah.
Oh, love that pop-in. The tiger stripes spawn only came in after I started fighting the tiger.
I'm sure there's some kind of multi-word cliche about that, but I've completely forgotten what it might be.
Oh, probably. Also, for some reason, the tiger it has a mane.
Well, yeah, why not?
Just because. I'm not. Just because. And it fell through. It fell into the floor. Goodbye.
I mean, I don't know what we were expecting. I mean, MMOs are going to have a certain amount of jank anyway, to be fair.
They absolutely will. And I do not blame this one for the jank, though. When it animation cancels me for no discernible reason.
Yeah, that's unideal.
It's not great. Doesn't feel. But yes, it is a main. You are right, Magistress. It is something that resembles a main tiger definitely exists in places, but this isn't that place. With links here. I look at that. You can see perfectly clearly. Look at my footsteps.
Okay. That is a thing that I have seen.
This video game.
10 out of 10. Brilliant
Raporus,
design.
that's absolutely what they're doing. Oh, they're just going lion dogs. Lion dogs have manes. Therefore, we're just going to put living lion dogs around.
Ah.
You are absolutely correct. There's no way that's not what they're doing. What the heck are you? Oh god, this thing is officially listed as scary.
Uh-oh.
I believe in us. I do not believe in us. That thing just spewed a laser beam at me.
It's the laser lion dog tiger lynx.
Exactly. Exactly. It just also two-shot.
I guess we might as well go out to Tibet.
Yeah, this is a great time while I am running back over to the air shrine. This is a great time to talk about Tibet.
So the Qing, at the same time that they're building up for what will eventually become the invasion of China, but to be fair, might not be. I mean, they are directing their attentions westwards. They are looking at the Mongol steppe.
Yo.
One of the big coups for the Qing, and the reason the Qing even existed, arguably, was that in 1635? I'm trying to remember if I got the right year. Yeah, 1635. Lichtan Khan, who was the last nominal ruler of the Northern Yuan, surrendered to the Qing and handed over the Yuan Imperial seal. So that's significant for two main reasons. The first is that, yes, that is to some extent laying claim to China, but it is also laying claim to the broader Mongol legacy.
Mm-hmm.
In the event, the Qing focus their energies on the conquest of China and don't really expand further into Mongolia for a while.
Yo.
But there is simultaneous with the collapse of the Ming is the collapse of the Four Oirad, which is the Oirads are sometimes known as the Western Mongols. They didn't call themselves Mongols though. They called themselves Oirads, although they spoke a Mongolic language, or they spoke Mongolic languages and had been part of Chinggis's empire. The collapse of the Four Oirad leads eventually to the rise of the Zungars, who were one of the major tribes of the Oirad, to leading most of the Oirad peoples except for the Khoshuts and the Torhuts, who may or may not turn up. The Khoshuts are important because they go into Tibet, and they establish a state. They establish the Khoshut Khanate in Kokonor, now known as Qinghai. And they also establish, they don't establish, but they recognize the Ganden Podran, which is basically the palace at Ganden, as the governing body of Tibet. It essentially becomes a complicated thing where the Khoshut Khan, out of deference to the Tibetan religious establishment, because there was a genuine devotion to Tibetan Buddhism on the part of most Mongols by this point, establishes a Tibetan state to which he is theoretically subordinate.
Interesting.
In a somewhat complicated way. The Zungars are also very devoted to Tibetan Buddhism, and one of their most prominent leaders is a guy called Galdan, who had been a student of the 5th Dalai Lama, but who returned to take up power in the after the death of his brothers. Galdan has it as his mission to suppress the local, regional religious leaders, the Kutuktus of Mongolia, in order to extend the authority of the Dalai Lama. And so this brings him into conflict with the Qing, who intervene to protect the independent Mongolian polities, and they are then brought under Qing protection and eventually Qing rule. Hang on, sorry.
Gesundheit.
This leans into a prolonged series of Qing-Zungar conflicts, which one of which occurs in 1720 when the Zungars invade Tibet under Galdan's nephew Tsewang-Rabdan, who was not an ally of Galdan. Tsewang-Rabdan was an enemy of Galdan, and so basically the idea is that they're trying to take over Tibet in order to ensure the continuity of this Tibetan religious support, given that the last guy, Galdan, died. Tsewang-Rabdan's invasion of Tibet is initially successful in that he does drive out the Khoshuts, but then the Qing intervene, and so they take over Tibet themselves. So actually I've rushed the timeline. It was 1718 the Zungars invade, and 1720 the Qing counterattack. And so that then brings Tibet loosely under Qing domination.
Yeah.
The Qing don't, like the Khoshuts, see themselves as subordinate to the Tibetans, but there are Qing emperors who do have a genuine interest in and devotion to Tibetan Buddhism, particularly the Tianlong Emperor.
Okay.
And to what extent it is a cynical process and to what extent it is genuine belief will always be open to question. To some extent, because I see Tianlong as kind of Machiavellian, I buy Pamela Crossley's view that he doesn't really believe anything, in a sense. But there is a very good case for him having a genuine interest, at the very least, in Tibetan Buddhism. So I don't want to downplay that aspect. I just think it's always questionable saying whether a political leader genuinely believes something.
Sure.
Particularly in a historical sense. The Qing extend their power in Tibet considerably in the 1790s, in the wake of what are known as the two Gurkha campaigns. In 1789, there is a Nepali attack on the Tibetans, which the Qing claimed to have won, but really didn't.
Okay.
And then there's another one in 1792, which the Qing do win. But these are listed in the Tianlong Emperor's canon of completed campaigns, because technically, the campaigns did finish.
Sure. I mean, win, lose, or draw, it's over.
Yeah. And so he, after the defeat of the Second Nepali invasion in 1792, there is a bit of an issue that is raised, which is that it was discovered that at least one of the major Tibetan monks, who was in charge of the monastery at Trashi Lunpo, had pretty much surrendered to the Nepalese immediately. Like there was this scare about Tibetan collaboration with the Nepali kingdom, and this combined with existing concerns over the nature of reincarnation in Tibet, because the Qing had always had a problem with the Kutuktus, who were supposed to be these reincarnating figures, because they always happened to be the sons of prominent Mongolian nobles.
Gee, what are the odds?
It's funny how that happens, right? But they just did. So in 1757, after a major Mongolian revolt by Shinganjab, they mandated that all future Kutuktus would be Tibetan.
All right.
And also, actually, they well, I can get into Qing Mongolia later, but an interesting thing is that the Qing kind of suppress Mongolian as a clerical language and mandate that Tibetan Buddhism as practiced in Mongolia had to be done in Tibetan. So there's an attempt by the Qing to use the Tibetan clergy as a means of centralizing things. Like, the Tibetan clergy themselves are interested in centralizing control over these regional monasteries, and the Qing are more than happy to oblige because they see advantages in a centralized religious system. So that's part of, the complicated layers of colonialism, if you want to call it that are going on. State building, if you want to be more neutral about it. But there's definitely this attempt to establish a particular norm religiously that has to be followed. But anyway, the reincarnation problem is that if you are allowed to essentially pick reincarnations, that results in problems of nepotism. Sure. And so what the Qing introduce is the golden urn. The most important lamas, i.e. the Dalai Lama and Panda Lama, have to be selected at random from a shortlist by quite literally drawing names out of a golden urn, as long as there is any doubt about potential succession. If there is no doubt, which did occur on 2 occasions, that's fine. There were 2 Dalai Lamas who were selected without the use of the golden urn because nobody objected to their candidacy.
Sure.
It was only in cases where, hang on, there might be a little bit of dubiousness involved here that the golden urn was mandated.
Uh-huh.
So, Max Whiteman has argued that the golden urn, as instituted by the Qing, has some degree of colonial element in 2 regards. The first is that the Tianlong Emperor, as the secular ruler of the Manchus and of the Han Chinese and of the Tibetans and Manchus and Mongols and Muslims, was claiming the authority to basically dictate to the Tibetan Church how they should practice their religion.
Okay.
The second aspect of this is that his ostensible justification was that within the Qing Empire, within China proper, officials were assigned 2 postings with a lottery system. Like, if 2 postings... Well, not even if. When you had a regular rotation, if you'd have 2 postings open at once, and they would be assigned at random, for instance. And this, he argues, was good because it prevents, the building up of interested parties.
Yep.
And so Oitman argues that the Tianlong Emperor was quite consciously trying to impose a system that existed in China proper onto Tibet on the basis that he personally believed that it was better.
Okay.
That said, it is complexicated in that the Tibetans themselves and some Tibetan monks were happy to make use of the golden urn, although that at the same time is complicated by, in that classic, who wants to side against the people who are in charge for the time being issue.
Of course.
And like, if some monasteries are very eager to say, "Oh, we know that we're not covered by the provisions, but we want to use the urn anyway," that kind of intentional flattery can be cynical as well as genuine.
Yeah, of course.
So, yeah.
Yeah?
Now, over the 19th century, there is an increasing sense among the Tibetans that the Qing really don't care that much about Tibet. And by the latter half of the 19th century, in the post-Taiping period, when the Qing are really capitulating to Han interests, that gains a lot of currency. The idea that while the early Qing were a proper Buddhist state, Tibet was now being ruled by a Sinocentric entity, and that Tibet should reassert its independence, which eventually does happen in 1911. So, Tibet's eventual independence in 1911 is not just a thing that happens because China collapses. There was already a growing resistance to the Qing on the part of both the Tibetans and the Mongols for being too pro-Han, at the same time that the Han were vilifying the Qing for being too pro-Manchu.
Yeah, that all follows. I cannot make coherent thoughts right now because panic. Run away.
Yeah, that's fair.
Run away. Nailed it. Hello. Go away. Yeah, that made them all run away. Perfect. If I can hit them, if I can shoot them at a spot where they can't attack me back from, they just run away. So we're good. We made it.
Oh. Yep.
Okay. So, this is the air shrine. Full Avatar rules.
Hooray!
Hooray. It's a horrible place. It's a horrible place and I hate it.
To be fair, they've got 2 towers. If
they?
there's a bell in one and a drum in the other, at least we can say they tried.
Well, we should be able to figure that out relatively simply. There is nothing in either one.
Cool, they didn't try.
Hooray! God. I also do want to point out on the way here, we passed through an area that has, very, oak trees. We passed through an area that looks like the rest of the, it's right around here. We passed an area where all the trees are just the same as in the rest of Aeternum, and not the weird pseudo-tropical trees that we see up here.
Consistency. Gotta love it.
Gotta love it. Now let's see if I can get up at the side of this. To avoid... animations are hard.
I get the not even trying thing, but I think the interesting thing is, there's no reason you couldn't just plonk down a load of these trees. So, in other words...
Effort... Well... Hello.
10 out of 10!
The inside of your asset looks lovely. We also did get a document, though.
Yes.
Oh! What document was that? This one?
Invitation or something? Was it?
It was something. No, it's not that one. It's not that one. It's not that one.
Isn't it this?
It must be this one. Yeah.
Well, I think it's the invitation one, isn't it?
Maybe? No? Oh no, it was right over here. Yeah, the invitation to the palace.
Maybe?
Yeah, I think it's this one, right?
Yeah.
That was less dramatic than I'd hoped. But man, let us now actually look at these guys. Because I can get a nice view of one of them from a spot where he
She
cannot...
refers to them as elemental dragon shrines, which may explain the dragon head.
Maybe? Yeah. I wish we had more...
I'm giving it more credit than it's really due.
Let me up. Okay. Now, he's not aggro on me, which means we can look at this dude now. This dude is wild. Like, what's up with his scarf? Why is his scarf like this? Come now.
Yes.
Why is his hat like this? Niram
Why
pointed
is
out
anything?
his sword is probably, I mean, an exaggerated version of something from the 20th century.
Yeah.
So...
Hang on.
Why is any of this?
Oh, no, never mind. I was going to say, seemed to be a weird black line, but no, it's just the sort of wispy, smoky stuff.
Yeah. This stuff is called very helpfully corruption.
Ah!
Which definitely is not generic at all.
No, never.
No idea what you're talking about.
Okay, for some reason that guy just vaguely looked superhero-like. The guy hopping about. Anyway.
Yep.
It looked vaguely like he had a superhero mask on.
Look, he's not as cool as us with our luchador mask, so I don't care.
Ah, that's fair. Yeah.
But yeah, he does have a look, doesn't he?
Hmm.
Jeez.
But I guess let's get back into the imperialism stuff, because you mentioned the competing imperialism bit earlier, and that's
Sure.
So I mentioned this with Taiwan, that the Qing were not just operating unilaterally, that by the later stages there was a genuine problem that Japan was starting to have interest in Taiwan.
Yeah.
Maybe not necessarily ambitions as such, at least in terms of rhetoric, because the ostensible allegation was that, oh no, you can't have this ungoverned territory.
Uh-huh.
But in Korea especially, the Qing were actively in competition with several foreign powers. Firstly, Japan, and principally Japan, really. Originally, the Qing had a sort of suzerainty over Korea. I don't want to talk about the tributary system at too much length because it's its own can of worms that IR scholars have turned from. Historians don't believe the tribute system existed. At least not historians who actually specialize in the topic.
Okay.
IR scholars have resurrected the concept, and it is now annoyingly prevalent in general discourse. The reality is that Korea was not part of a tribute system because there was no system, and because tribute was not the only part of it.
Makes sense.
Korea's relationship to the Qing was distinct and specific to Korea, in the same way that Vietnam's relationship to the Qing was distinct and specific to Vietnam, even though both were arguably tributary states. That's the main thing. Korea's relationship to the Qing was complicated. From the Qing perspective, it was very important that Korea be seen as acting like the model tributary.
Yeah.
Because that essentially legitimized, to some extent, its usurpation of the Ming mantle as being kind of the center of the Confucian world. Korea privately does not accept this, for the most part.
What a shock.
In fact, it was
Imagine
common
that.
in Korea to number their years not by the reign names of the Qing emperors, but to do so as though the last Ming emperor had never died.
Oh, that's hysterical. Oh, that's great.
That was the extent to which the Koreans saw themselves as the inheritors of the civilized Confucian mantle. Now, to be fair, civilized Confucian also means, not nasty, horrible Manchu barbarian.
Well, yeah.
And there is a similar thing in Japan that the Qing conquest of China was seen as, ooh, that's a bit odd. That's a bit of a blow to Sino-centric, pride, I guess. But anyway, the Korean perspective on the Qing is not as positive as the Qing want the Korean perspective on the Qing to be. But at least in the performative aspect, which is ultimately what is going to matter the most, Korea does play the part that the Qing want them to play, where the Qing want them to play it, and in private, continue to see the Qing as not the best.
Understandable.
In the 19th century, this gets complicated because basically, when Europeans are encountering Korea, the Koreans say, "Oh no, we consider ourselves a Qing subject. Talk to the Qing." And the Qing say, "I mean, the Koreans aren't our subject though. They are a separate state. Talk to them." So this creates a complicated back and forth until eventually Japan turns up and tries to see concessions from Korea in the 1870s.
Yeah.
And this leads to the Qing basically bringing about a negotiated settlement where they give up a lot of the exclusive privileges they have in Korea.
Yeah.
But what they do is they basically invite the Western powers in. So that instead of a case of it being the Qing versus Japan, instead Korea they basically do an open door policy in Korea, basically.
Okay.
Where everyone gets a certain degree of access, and the Qing claim a few unique traditional privileges. And this eventually leads into a lot of disputes, and eventually the First Sino-Japanese War in 1894, which leads to Korea becoming an independent country. I don't want to say, an independent country under Japanese domination, because the triple intervention that ends, there's a so-called triple intervention of Russia, France, and Germany that ends it doesn't end the Sino-Japanese War. That prevents the Sino-Japanese War from resuming, and also considerably limits Japanese aim, means that Russia ends up as the de facto protector of Korea.
Joyous.
Korea presented itself, though, as having become independent of the Qing. That's where it gets interesting, because, the Korean perspective is that they saw themselves as having become a Qing dependency. Even if the Qing perspective was that Korea was still a separate state, which is, I don't think, a particularly common state of affairs.
That's safe to say.
In world history, but there we go. But then the Russo-Japanese War happens and Korea ends up under Japanese domination and is eventually annexed in 1910. So, the Qing did actively compete in this arena with Korea. Over Korea.
Yeah.
With other powers with an interest in the region. And you see lesser examples of this in, for instance, Central... Oh, I've had a freeze again.
We back?
Yep.
Technical
Bit choppy, but
difficulties. We're back.
You see a lesser example of this in Central Asia with the Yaqub Beg regime.
Okay.
Which is its own kind of worms. Yaqub Beg was a general from the Central Asian Khanate of Kokand who saw an opportunity in Xinjiang in 1864-5 when that region revolted against the Qing kind of as the Taiping were wrapping up.
Yeah.
He turns up, establishes his own state, sometimes known as Yetishar, and later known as the Emirate of Kashgar. So he ends up being backed by the Ottomans and the British, and also having relations with Russia and with the Qing. And while there was a sort of revanchist, irredentist group in the Qing which won out and reconquered Xinjiang, and then goes on this much more extensive colonial policy compared to the 18th century. There was also a group willing to compromise with Yaqub Beg, and by extension with the British and the Russians over the status of Xinjiang.
Yeah.
So there was almost sort of a competing imperialism with the British and the Russians over Central Asia as well.
Oh, that's wild.
And indeed, the Qing-Dzungar War was, in a sense, a competing imperialism with the Dzungars over Tibet and the Mongols, and indeed to an extent with the Russians at first, because the Russians had several brushes with alliances with the Dzungars that never really came to fruition, largely because of the treaties of Nerchinsk and Kiefta, where the Qing said, hey, we will deliberately accept an unfair trade deal with you, favoring you, the implication being if you do anything to support our enemies,
Yeah.
that money stops flowing.
Yo.
What else? Vietnam is kind of interesting. Like the Qing fund a proxy war in northern Vietnam to try and keep the French out, which doesn't
Okay.
work fully.
Yeah.
But the guy who leads this proxy army, a guy called Liu Yongfu, ends up being the Qing's attempt to launch a guerrilla war on Taiwan against the Japanese after they had to concede it during the first Sino-Japanese War. So there's a lot of attempts to use proxies in various areas. We talked about Korea, but also in Southeast Asia. So the Qing are really trying in the late 19th century, after they've dealt with their domestic insurrections, really try to flex their international muscle and function largely as an imperial power, that's pretty much congruent with European powers and with Japan.
Sure.
I think there's a certain amount of nationalist myth-making involved in why we don't think of the Qing in the late 19th century as an imperial power,
Yeah.
and certainly for why we don't think of it as an imperial power often in its earlier years. But I think also the very fact that it failed also leads us to forget that it happened.
That's true. That's very true. Yeah. Why are there so many enemies here? Ah. Heck. This is bad.
Framing of Joseon as a client state? Yeah, so, again, not everything in the Qing are my area, to be fair, but it's like... The basic idea is, as long as Joseon makes a public show of recognizing Qing suzerainty, then the Qing are satisfied. At least for the 18th century. When you get into the 19th century, it becomes more complicated because, as we talked about, there's the border problem. Like, for a while, there's a relatively permeable zone between the Qing and Korea. But the ginseng collapse and the establishment of agricultural colonies means that that Korea is no longer something that the Qing can afford to have as a somewhat vague area. There does now start to be a hard border with controls. So, kind of, the reification of Korean statehood has a lot to do with Qing domestic crises, which lead them to take actions that erode what had been more negotiable areas between the Qing and Korea. And I think the framing of Joseon as a client state is something that is in part retroactive because of that kind of effective... Korea is under Qing protection, but that doesn't make a Qing protectorate after the Treaty of Gwangju, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
The Qing kind of abrogate any notion of overt suzerainty over Korea after 1876, while still having a large amount of informal influence. This kind of then turns into attempts to exert more control, however. Like, Yuan Shikai, who may be familiar as the guy who tried to make himself emperor after the 1911 revolution, was also the Qing's first official commissioner to Korea, I think ever? Certainly for some 200 years by the time he was appointed in the role. So, like, the Qing do try to extend a greater control over Korea than they ever had done, right at the end of their period of principal influence.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense to me. That seems... Oh heck, it's Beyblades! Oh no.
Ah! I think you've been told to play yakety sax over
There's
this.
a mini boss. I'm gonna die here, but there's a mini boss. Chat, you're gonna have to
Uh-oh.
just clip it. We can pause the clip. We can take a look at that. As a matter of fact, I can do that myself. I got to the top of the citadel, and then we
Didn't quite make it.
didn't make it out, but we saw a named character, some sort of maiden, or like shrine maiden, something. I think I saw the name was Pung, which is just not great. Let's see if I can.
Yeah,
We're just not going to. Okay, that was scary. Why were there so many enemies? There are so many enemies there.
I wonder if it's because it's an endgame area intended to
What?
be encountered by slightly more people with slightly higher levels.
What now?
But, you know, there are
No.
no slightly higher people, and also it's getting to that grindy phase, especially with no other people, so
Exactly.
I don't think anyone can be faulted. You least of all.
And unfortunately, right, it's once something goes south and you start running past enemies, they just stay aggroed on you. And so you end up with like 15 of them chasing you, and you can't stop. Otherwise, you will get swarmed.
Oh
So,
dear.
Yeah,
That's good.
it's not great. So we're just gonna run in a different direction now. I don't know. I didn't see. I should have just made a clip, Master. So if you actually look, why don't I see if the clip went through, and then we will take a look at it and actually pause the thing. I'll pull it up on stream if it actually works. If I actually captured it.
Right at the end.
Give me just a second here.
Sorry.
Let's see.
Excuse me for a bit while I just
Oh,
wipe some grime off my monitor that I just noticed
Yeah, no
was there.
worries. Cool. So I did capture it. So we're just gonna quick do some shenanigans here. In order to bring this up on stream. Don't mind me. It's gonna be. Where is it? The clips manager. And if we make that visible, then all of a sudden we replace ourselves with an older version of ourselves.
I think
Wait,
you were told to play
there-
Yakety Sax
There's
over
a pause.
What's
Play
this?
mini. I can almost make out what it is.
Run
Pause?
away.
Can almost make out what her name was. Ping. Sky Song Maiden Ping.
Okay.
So, that's the thing.
I mean, it is a legitimate name.
Yeah.
It's just not really a surname, as far as I know.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, there might be. Literally anything could. I just
Lit-
don't recognize it as a surname most of the time.
Exactly. Literally anything could be possible here, including the fact that this is a really crappy Mulan reference. Like, that is my best guess as to what the heck's going on there,
Maybe.
if I'm honest. Right, when in doubt, take the least charitable account.
It could be worse. You could be the Harry Potter series, and you could have Cho Chang.
This is true, it can always be worse.
It can always be considerably worse.
So... yeah,
Pray Orb.
or...
Does anyone else get that reference, or is it just me?
I mean, there's like 15 different orb references that it could be.
That's true.
I always think of the GDQ orbs.
Oh my god, yes!
Yes.
Someone did.
Yes!
Or maybe not. Or maybe not. I can't tell. But someone typed Pain Pecco in chat,
Yes.
and yes, I am now.
Okay.
I now appreciate Rapturous 77 a lot more.
Oh boy. Hey look, I can actually fight these guys. They're not overwhelmingly overpowered. That being said, that is a tiger. I'm gonna not fight them. I'm gonna go underneath the bridge. because that tiger shoots laser beams. Again, another thing that doesn't... I do not pretend to understand how that sentence just came out of my mouth, but...
Sorry, I'm afraid I was
observable
distracted
fact.
by many things, so whatever embarrassment you may have had, I did not notice.
No, just the statement that I'm going to go underneath the bridge because the tiger shoots laser beams.
Ah, right, yes.
That's totally a sensible thing, right?
Yeah, of course.
Hey, go away. Go away. I'll fight you with this.
Actually, I'm beginning to wonder if... No, the paint pecker was in relation to Cho Chang. It had nothing to do with prey to the orb. Never mind. But still,
Sad.
convenient coincidence.
Convenient coincidences.
First it was the orb, then it was the cube, and then it was the debut. Anyway, that was the cube first, then the orb.
Okay, now we're in the Earth Shrine.
Yay, the Earth Shrine!
And everyone is not
You
paying
thought that was a
attention to us?
tapir instead of a hog. You know, if they were really being
is
clever,
that
they could have had the panda tapir.
They could have, but no. They just have a rainbow, a vaguely rainbow-colored pig. Anyway, I also want to look at like the sword
Is
dude's
that a-
armor, because
I
that's
was gonna say, would that be potentially a reference to Age of Empires 3's flying purple tapir?
I wish. That would be very cool.
I loved the flying purple tapir.
Oh,
It turns
heck,
out actually
there
it
are
was
so many
like a few-
good men. And this dude, the sword dudes. I was hoping to get a good look at one of them, but it is not to be because too many people with bullets.
much
They're
gun.
having an argument until they both shoot me. Heck. Run! Run faster!
Oh no.
Ow. Ow. I only took 2 bullets. I'll just drink something and it dulls the pain.
Wouldn't it be great if you could just do that in real life? Get shot? Oh no, let me just drink a thing.
It's a flawless hiding place. They'll never find me here.
So the Earth Shrine.
It worked! Chad, it worked! They all left.
I'm not gonna lie, that mask reminds me of Spawn.
Amazing. I buy it. Okay, there. Hack. Hack.
Anyway, did I say? No, I probably did say that it's a shame that they didn't go for the panda tapir.
Yes.
Yeah, there's just a vaguely rainbow-coloured hog. Yeah.
Yep. Anyway, this guy has like a lion dog on his shield, which reminds me
of course.
most prominently of AC Valhalla, and nothing else. Why is his name Kilgoran? His name is Kilgoran. Whomst? Primst. Also, we just harvested a turtle.
Harvested what?
A turtle.
Ah.
There was just one walking about. Okay. Well,
I'm wondering if
There he is,
there
look at
may
him.
be some vague reference to Apocalypse Now.
Maybe? Ah, seems as plausible as anything.
Oh, good lord, that's a lot of enemies.
There's a lot of this is why you either commit to the run or you don't, or you commit to taking them out carefully one by one. We committed to the run away. Ow. I'm getting shot in the back. How are you still chasing me? Kilgoran, why are you still chasing me? If you're good. Oh, now you're running away. Of course, now you're running away. Not that I was like, hey, wait, you're far enough away, I could actually fight you. But no. Ow. That was a bullet over my shoulder. Okay. This is fine. This is fine.
Everything is fine.
This is fine. What? Why is there Angry Earth here? Alright, another faction in this game. Everyone we've been fighting so far is taken over by the corruption due to a Faustian bargain. Another extremely generic and not at all problematic name is the Angry Earth, which is the Earth but angry.
Cool.
And so...
Oh, because we were at the Earth Shrine, so I guess...
Yeah, but there isn't Angry Earth at the Earth Shrine. There's Angry Earth next door to the Earth Shrine. Just like down the road a bit.
Yeah, but of course.
There is an
If you
Angel Tree.
lure them away, do they fight each other?
No.
Or no?
No.
No.
They can't even remember that, like, the wolves would probably hunt the turkeys and the elk.
That's true.
You're kidding me? Actual interfaction conflict when they can't even make the wolves and hunt turkey and elk?
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Alright. I see the point.
That would involve, like, viewing this as a world instead of a very superficial representation of something that might possibly pass as one once in a while.
Yeah, that's fair. What if Mummy Ooh Earth was mad? Oh god.
I hate you, chat. We're just gonna keep running away, and if that's if that ain't the theme of the game, today, we're just running away, over and over. Because like I don't actually have anything interesting to say about the Musketeers apart from this is far and away the largest. The two groups of people that seem to be allowed to have muskets in this game among the enemies are pirates and Chinese people. What the lesson to take away there is, I don't know, but those are the two main groups of enemies that have. Every once in a while, there'll be like. Don't do that. Don't run away. Just because you're red instead of blue doesn't mean you're not being horny on main, and I will shoot you for it.
I mean, that's fair enough. I mean, horny knows no coloured boundaries, or something like that.
Heck. We're just engaging in a quick shooting contest. Ow. Hooray.
Rank up.
Now, Peacock, just because you have red feathers instead of blue, doesn't mean you have no excuse to have this out like this.
Sorry, at the moment you turned away, it looked vaguely like it had despawned.
I thought that exact thing. That's why I turned back around, because I was like, wait, did that just despawn? Because it definitely flickered out of existence for a moment.
Oh no, it definitely is.
Ow,
Like you
shit.
have to look at it from like if you look at it at too oblique an angle, it will just disappear.
Yep. Sometimes.
But it's just the crimson one. The normal one doesn't.
No, this one's also crimson. It's just like that one in particular is in a spot where it despawns.
No, the second one you shot as well.
Oh, incredible.
Yeah.
Also, this boar is colored like it's a tapir.
It's a very feral hog, yes.
Like, it's gotten a bit lost. Oh, heck. No, don't, I don't need, not two of you. This is getting out of hand.
See, this is why you need an assault rifle to deal with the 30 to 50 feral hogs that have suddenly...
Yep. Oh, heck. There's the guy with a gun, too. Run. Okay, I apologize.
the price of attempting to destroy the local environment.
I know, right? Nearest visit settlement is Ebonscale Reach. Okay, we're good. Of course, he isn't hunting the boars or anything. He's just shooting at us. Because everything in this land exists in perfect harmony, except for us. We are the problem. Without us, nature will be healing.
Yes, but you are, of course, the protagonist.
Correct. Absolutely.
Understood.
Because, you know, the... Oh, hey, we can just snipe people.
I don't think there's any need. I don't think there is either a need or a way to complete that sentence.
Nope. No, of course not. More damage. Oh, I hate that. All right, let's just get I snipe better. We are the goodies. Because there's like a whole plot line about how, you know, we are not allowed to leave because there's an evil storm that wrecks all of our boats. And we are trying to find a way to deal with this tempest so that, like, people could, you know, actually leave. Which, yes, means that we are doing colonialism in a place that we cannot leave from.
Okay.
You can't. There is in fact literally no way to get back to or communicate with the places we came from.
Okay.
Yep.
But presumably,
Uh-huh.
you will never get off because the game wants to keep adding content, and by the time it stops adding content, it's because there's no attention, and so they will never add the end.
Well, of course. There is no endgame.
There is a ludonarrative dissonance here, of quite substantial proportion, I would say.
I mean, there's also heck, the pigs are back. Run! Run away! Run away!
Uh-oh. Sorry, there's also.
Okay, we're good. Have we tried sacrificing a bull to Neptune? I mean, someone sacrificed something to Poseidon, and then we stole some gold from him, so, you know, does that count? There's a side quest where we have to steal some stuff from a place named after Poseidon, so, surely that counts. Okay, there's a pig and an alligator chasing me. This is severely unfair. I feel outnumbered.
I mean, there's one of you and two of them.
I mean, yes. The video game is cyberbullying me.
Oh no.
Heck, heck. Heck. Heck.
Does anyone have any random pressing questions? Because I think the problem I just realised is that I did a lot of narrative discussion of Qing colonialism and not a lot of specifics.
But yes, if people have questions for Jeremy, this is a great time for it because we, never mind. We just came across the ruins of the Imperial Shipwreck.
Oh!
So, seafaring.
Is it back to treasure ship time?
It is treasure ship time because, oh boy, look at that treasure ship right there.
Yay!
We're just going to run like crazy through this area again and be ready to keep an eye on it on the fly. Because that's all I got going for me right now. I do not have the stats, I just have the speed.
Yeah, so there is... I don't want to say that it's just Gavin Menzies. There is a lot of Chinese nationalism involved in trying to make the treasure fleet seem more substantial than it was, even if they don't claim that it went to the Americas. That said, like I said earlier, a small ship can get to New York, well, can get to San Francisco and back, and a big-ish ship can get to New York. So this size of ship, even if it's bigger than any... is it actually bigger than any actual one? Like, how long would you estimate this ship is?
Let me kill this one dude and then we'll get a good look at it. My sense is that it's actually, probably like a B class. It's that it's meant to feel big, but I don't think it's actually, like, all that big historically. Or certainly not equivalent to the largest. Because we're
B
about,
class is...
if we assume we're 2 meters. 2, 4,
Yeah.
I'd
So
say
a
that's
B
like
class jump is about 50
40?
meters.
40 meters? Maybe 50?
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, that would be pretty normal size then.
Right, I mean, that's not looking much bigger than 50 meters.
Let me have a look at... I swear Paul Van Dyke has a table of these somewhere. Right, so...
This is just... Did they come here on 3 whole boats? 4. They seem to have arrived on 4 entire boats. I'm just
Why
so
not?
impressed. How big is the treasure fleet?
Oh gosh,
Do you have like just in like rough flavors?
I should have looked into this.
No, man, we're
I
sneaking.
don't... How many ships were sent? Apparently it's not entirely known, but I think the largest claim for any of these 6 or 7 voyages that was involved was 250.
Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot more sense, and I mean...
Most of them were like in the 60 to 80 range.
Certainly.
And that may well be true of the second one as well, but I don't know for sure.
I mean, that gets us close enough. The point is mostly to highlight just how absurd it is, the idea of this super powerful empress makes this cursed deal and dooms her people after arriving on 4 ships.
Yeah, that's not ideal.
Sets off to save her people and escape the tyranny of her brother on 4 ships. She can muster a few more than that, I hope. I would hope that an actual empress would be able to... Sorry. That one snuck up on me. But would be able to muster a slightly more force than 4 ships.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm kind of a little bit distracted because I'm trying to hunt down a footnote that will give me some information on junk sizes. So, where is the index here even?
Ha! The eternal question.
24 to 30 of Van Dyke. There we go.
Hey, look, we found
Does
the
he
fire
give
shrine.
a highly detailed thing?
Who's ready for another run-through chat? Why is there a cultist playing a drum? Why is there a cultist waving vaguely at a gong? That's worse.
Why isn't there a cultist waving vaguely at a gong? I mean, isn't that what you'd want?
Just the vaguest of waves. Okay, now he's trying to stab me. This seems far more on point. Ow. We'll just heal real quick. Run away. Run away. Continue running away. Don't mind me. They've got a jar. They've got like a chimney or something. Captain Liu 10, a dude with a spear. Hack.
Cool, why not?
I am in bad shape. Continue running. I was hoping that there would be something to hack. Oh boy. Yeah, this is gonna go bad. Hack. Chat, why do I keep doing this to myself? Heck. They headshot, random headshot. Oh crap. That was his name. Yes, Magistressa. As in, literal Avatar The Last Airbender reference. Because, Luten is the name of Iroh's deceased son.
Oh.
I hate everything. I hate everything about everything. God.
This is actually surprisingly hard. Wherever I'm wondering if the footnote here is to a different edition, and that's why
Ah.
I can't find...
The Perpetual Academic Struggle. Which of the 3 editions of this super important work actually has the information you wanted in it? But yeah, I mean, I think in the meantime though, it is super telling that thus far in our, like, bosses, we have, right, the Taiying Empress, being fairly transparently, Wu Zetian, but Zhou. We have a Mulan reference. We have an Avatar reference.
Mm-hmm.
To be honest, that's pretty much everything we've got going for us right now. But
It's all just referential.
it's like, it's referential, and it's not even referential to Chinese media.
Hmm.
It's referential to American media that is superficially, aesthetically, Chinese.
Yeah.
That is incredibly revealing to me.
Hmm.
Because, I mean, raise your hand if you're surprised, chat. If any of you
Blow
raise
his
your hand,
hand.
I'm firing you right now. I don't care that I'm not paying you. I will fire you. There is no room, like, it's so annoying. Because it is obviously, transparently, just Western or China only exists. I mean, heck, we've got a button for it. Observe the screen. And there are the entirety of my thoughts. There's a bison! Wait, what the fuck?
Why not?
That's a laser beam. I don't know which is worse, the bison or the laser beam. Actually,
All
I do
of
know
it.
which is worse,
All
it's
the
the bison.
everything.
There's another bison!
I'm wondering if he even typed the right thing.
Huh?
In the in the footnotes, in the endnotes.
Hopefully not. That'll make that a pain to find. More of a pain to find?
He does have, thankfully, other endnotes that also give other stuff. So let's see.
In the
When I
meantime,
click the
chat,
bookmark.
a disclaimer. Do not pet the bison. I should be very dead right now. Clearly, the developers of this
Right.
game have never been, like, within a mile of a bison in their life. Because they would know fear if they had been. They would know fear. Because bison will fuck you up. They're
Ooh.
mean. They can run at 35 miles an hour. Their horns are actually like 18 inches long. And they are aggressive as shit.
Hooray! Hooray for the bison.
Exactly. And, I mean, they weigh like a ton. So, they'll ruin your day. And you should absolutely, under no circumstances, ever approach a bison. If they approach you, pray you have something between you and them.
Let's see.
And now, let's see if there's anything there's another tiger here in this grotto. I'm sure that's fine. God, I don't even have anything clever to say anymore. It's just this this is precisely as Orientalist as one would predict from the words a China-themed area in a colonialism MMO made by Amazon. It's exactly what the label says it should be. And there's just no analysis to be done here.
Yeah, it's...
Oh, Chaotic Raven, I've had the exact same experience, where the bison decide the highway are the best way to get around, and if there are cars on the highway, we're just gonna hope that the cars, or that it does not... I wonder if I can beat these two. There are only 2 of them. I believe in me. Nope, there are 5 of them. There are 5 of them. Abort! Abort mission. We are going into this mountain temple, which has two dog lions, or lion dogs, and a dragon head. Perfect.
Let's see.
I don't even know where I have no idea where the dragon head part of the temple aesthetic comes from. I mean, right...
Yeah, it's just pain.
There's no referentiality to anything here beyond a vague, like, fake Buddhist aesthetic and some bamboo.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, look at this whole space. Ow. I'm just gonna have to eat some shots here. That's bad. Ow. Get inside, get inside.
So anyway, I was talking
up
about...
the stairs, up the stairs. Sorry. I'm running. What were you saying?
Oh, yep. Oh, sorry, we were speaking about ship sizes. Annoyingly, it seems like there's no real systematic classification for smaller ships.
Hysterical.
Like, an A-class junk is 74 cubits or higher. Which, yeah, how much is a cubit in this context? Basically, a cubit can be anywhere from about 14 to 19 English inches.
Yep.
So, that's unhelpful.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah.
Let's have a look.
Oh boy. So, I mean, you said it was 17 cubits?
74 cubits.
74. So, I mean, we're at least looking at something that's roughly like 100 feet tall. Right?
100 feet tall or 100 feet long?
Or, yeah, do you say it was 74 cubits long was the A-class?
Yeah. So, at the lower end, that's about 90 feet.
Yeah. So, I mean... Yeah, I guess that would make these, like, roughly... that would make the ships that we saw earlier, like, A-class or, right, slightly larger than that minimum A-class.
Yeah.
Because I would estimate them to be about, I would estimate that to be, like, roughly 100 feet.
Yeah, the upper end would be 120. It's a little weird because, like, the Qing is described as about 165 feet in terms of length overall.
Yeah.
And that's where it gets complicated because the measurement system for junks is not actually the overall length. It is a more limited length from basically the end of the rudder to the middle of the mizzenmast.
Okay.
Sorry, of the foremast or something like that. So there's bits on the end that aren't counted in the official measurement for, say, the Qing, which was classed as a B class, which is between 71 and 74 qubits.
Gotcha.
Confusingly, they like an alternative term is covits, which I don't think anyone would use anymore.
I think that's probably in poor taste.
Yeah. But 71 to 74 qubits is the B class range. C class ranges were. Sorry. The C class was theoretically 65 to 71 qubits long, but in reality, anything below a C class was apparently charged as though it was a C class for port duties at Canton. So, unfortunately, I can't find any description of smaller junks than that and how they were classified.
Well, that's okay, because
So there's
that
A,
still
B,
is
and
useful
C,
information.
all-
That right,
Yeah.
we're looking from the rudder to the foremast. So yeah, I'd say like those are. They are probably like B or A class. That we saw
Yeah.
earlier, but there were still only a handful of them, which means. And how
Yeah.
big is a crew? Do you know how big the crew is on, say, the Qing?
Yeah. The crew and the Qing. Once I knew what the number of the crew was.
Because I mean
Because
that gives...
it's important to note that the crew of the Qing was unusual in not being assembled in the typical manner, where you basically have the merchant owning the ship,
Yeah.
a crew that sticks with a given captain who are all from a similar locale,
Yeah.
and such. Like, they do have a funding merchant and a nominal Chinese captain.
Yeah.
But the crew was hired in two chunks. Like, some were hired at Whampoa and some were hired at Hong Kong, and they probably didn't get on, from what we can tell.
Okay.
So 26 Chinese crew were taken on at Whampoa.
Okay.
Maybe 12 European crew were added.
That's...
Sorry,
No worries. That still isn't very many people. That's a small crew.
good grief.
I mean, right, because that's only, what, like 38 people?
38 people, but there's more.
Of course.
Okay, so... Okay, so there we go. There's, So 3 European officers, possibly 12 other Europeans, 14 if we include 2 of the financiers,
Okay.
and in total, possibly 30 and more probably 40 Chinese crew. So maybe about 14 or so, 12 to 14 were taken on Hong Kong.
Okay. I mean,
So that's a grand total of
50-ish. Or, yeah, between 50 and 60 crew.
yeah, 50 to 60.
Okay, and do you know, just off the top of your head, if that's, like, relatively full capacity for a ship? Assuming that you're assuming with all the restrictions of, you know, having to spend most of the cargo space on either things you're selling or food.
It's a good question. I honestly don't know.
Fair enough.
Although it does sound very plausible. The thing is that somewhat larger European ships would have crews in the range of 120 to 180, depending on size, maybe.
Uh-huh.
And junks are actually very low labor
Okay.
intensive at the cost of considerably lower potential efficiencies. So I could definitely see 60 people meaningfully crewing a junk
Okay.
of size not that much smaller than an equivalently sized European ship.
Yeah.
That said, I think what's more impressive is the fact that 26 of those crew, the 26 from Whampoa, they sued the captain in New York and bought passage back to China.
Which is
So,
hysterical.
34 people sailed it across the Atlantic to get to London.
Okay. So, I mean, that is still revealing, though, right?
Yeah.
That as to just how small the number of people involved is, and therefore potentially how small the number of people who made it, who could have gone
How small the number of
in
people
fiction.
Yeah.
As
The crews do not need to be that big, but they can be.
Yeah.
big-ish. See, that's a good point. Let me have a look at Van Dyke's index, if he has an index.
Ha.
Please have an index.
What a weird request. You want an actual
Yes.
index in your books?
Yes, thank you, Van Dyke. I'm happy to look at all your stuff about records from Gothenburg another time.
Okay, let's see what's in this temple monastery. Or this Serenity Monastery? What a dumb name.
Good. Yes, yes, let's, yeah.
Run.
Cool. He does not have anything specific on junk crews.
Okay.
That's nice.
Because, yeah, I assume you could fit a lot of people on one of those if you needed to. But...
But you probably couldn't feed them.
Exactly. I would certainly not want to be the one trying to feed them in a case like this. So, I mean, we're looking at a really, really low population that made it here, which makes the quantity of... Oh, shit. Which makes the quantity of architecture made here to really, bonkers. Just completely
That does
absurd.
not seem like a lived-in area.
No.
That slope is far too steep.
Yes, there's none of this is lived in. Are you kidding me? This is just here to ruin my day. Heck. If I cannot get past you, I'll be so mad. Heck.
Oh well.
Yep, honestly, I was just going to try to get to the top of this, but I think that is everything.
Well,
Everything
in
of
order
note.
to just so that we have one last bit of stats.
Of course.
Thank you, Google Books, for finding this thing from 1844. A chunk of the size just named, which he didn't name. 476 tons burden, which let me just check because there are stats for the Qing's tonnage.
Yes.
Right. 400 measured, 700 approximate dead weight, and 700, 750, or 800. No unit mentioned, but... Okay, so a 476-ton junk, according to this 1844 document, has commonly a crew of 90 hands.
Okay.
So the Qing was a bit undercrewed, I think.
Okay.
If its measured tonnage was about 400 tons.
Sure.
And especially undercrewed if it was, in the sort of 700, 800 range.
Yep.
But that was its dead weight listed, so
Okay.
it's more complicated than just
Yeah.
measured tonnage. Still, there we go.
Point is, though, I think we can realistically say that we're unlikely to be having much more than 100 to maybe 150 people on board one of those ships.
Yeah.
Which
And yeah.
an excessively small population can actually be plausibly said here. But that doesn't, it's like, it's just for the aesthetic to have the excuse to have these weird mountain things.
It's not an uninteresting looking weird mountain thing. It's just
Really weird.
yeah.
It's just really.
And also, I mean, I don't want to go full Tartaria conspiracist, but
Uh-huh.
I'm not going to say that the construction of this structure, given the limitations imposed by the general circumstances of being, trapped on a island,
Uh-huh.
I don't feel like someone would build this before they had built a decently sized settlement.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the idea is supposed to be this was so long ago they've built up over a very long time to all of these, which have then gradually been taken over.
Apart from the bit where all the wood's still fresh.
Well, yeah. Everything magically regenerates, which definitely doesn't cause problems. Definitely doesn't cause logical problems with having cleared settlements. If you chop down the groves for a settlement and then it immediately regrows. Also, shout out to the birch trees that are just hanging out right here.
Why not?
Don't ask questions.
Yeah, that is a point, isn't it?
Yeah, no, there's a lot of logical issues with this game. Yeah. So, I think it's about time for us to wrap up, though, because we've been going for about 3 hours, and honestly, that's as much time as I can handle. We have explored a lot of Ebonscale Reach. We saw no narrative, but we saw a lot of aesthetic.
And we only mentioned Tartaria 3 times, including this
Correct.
time just now, which I think is a mercy.
Uh-huh. I think it is absolutely a mercy, because, while it is wild, and actually is probably the best supported thing in this game, amusingly, I just went to an area that supposedly in its history suffered a great flood that half buried all of the 12 million year old basalt structures. So, we're not going to get into it. Just be aware that I only partially did this intentionally.
Here's the thing: if everything regenerates, why doesn't stuff made with it despawn? Like,
No.
whoever discovers this place, and whoever discovers a way off this place, assuming that the regeneration stuff still happens, will have discovered infinite energy.
Yeah. Also, magic blue goo called Azov. Which is also, both literally magic and infinite energy. But yes.
Magic, it breaks everything.
It breaks
and
literally
solves
everything. It is exactly as silly as it sounds. This whole game is very silly. Unfortunately, right, I'm always really sad that there is nothing interesting to when we go through an area and there's truly just nothing interesting to say. But what's your impression of Ebonscale Reach? Because mine was that there was genuinely nothing interesting to say about it.
Mine was that you can vaguely see that they occasionally tried to have some interesting ideas, but in failing to draw on much of real depth, just didn't do anything with it. Like, I feel like you can draw too little, draw enough on history for it to be really annoying that you didn't draw more. I feel like the game didn't even do that.
No. Right.
It didn't fail interestingly. Like, if it had failed interestingly, there'd be stuff to comment on. As
Exactly.
it stands, it is mostly just, yeah, as you said, fantasy China, except as filtered through sort of American media depicting fantasy China.
Yep.
And I assume it was more interesting to hear me talk about, Qing colonialism in Central Asia and Southwest China than it was, to...
Honestly, yes. Because even though I spent most of it panicked running away, there's a lot of really cool history going on in there. And unfortunately, it's just, right, the game doesn't, not only is, not only doesn't engage with it, but seems completely unaware of it. Apart from, well, what's the old dynasty? I know, the Zhou. What's the aesthetic? Oh, it's Ming, because of course it is, because that's what all of the aesthetic is. There are lion dogs, yes. Temples in the mountains that do stuff, yes. And that's it. And dragons and Avatar.
If they'd done it legitimately as actual Ming claimant trying to build stuff up in the Caribbean for revenge against the Qing, I'd actually kind of respect that, in part because I'm not saying the Qing actually believed it, but I am saying there was a genuine scare in the 1760s when there was this allegation, sort of the Qing discovered these weapons stockpiles being held by people, and this story started going around that there was this Ming prince hanging out in Burma who had built a fleet of flying machines.
I love it. It would have
and
been
was
so
going
good.
to invade.
They
And
could-
this was taken entirely seriously, because I think it's important to note that the Qing were never really able to feel safe from the prospect of a nativist Han uprising.
Wait,
Um,
this is so good though. That even works within New World's dumbass level design. If you have airship shipyards.
Exactly. They could have actually drawn on a real historical conspiracy theory about Ming princes with flying machines.
And instead we get Ching Shi the shark, who is a dude
Yeah,
who fights with an anchor.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
The game failed interestingly in how it mimicked colonial government corruption. Yes.
this is true. Honestly, the most interesting thing is there's an exploit a couple months back of server ditching, where people would become governors of a place, raise all the taxes, enrich themselves, grab all the cash, and transfer servers.
Ah. Fun.
It's the most colonial thing.
Oh.
So,
Yeah.
the other question I usually ask people, well, as we're wrapping up here, a couple of questions I usually ask people. The first one is, tomorrow, Amazon, in their desperation to make this game not fail against their other MMO, have decided that you are in charge. The Jeff Bezos' $100 quadrillion has put you in charge. You're not allowed to just shut down the game, because that is obviously the correct answer. What do
Yeah.
you do first? What needs dealing with first?
I think
If you can be as precise as possible.
the first and most obvious thing is that there is just not a player population, and that is fundamentally because it seems to be because the game as a whole just isn't working.
Yes. On far more than a
And
historical level, this game does not seem to be working.
Yeah, and I don't see how anything of that vein can be resolved except with a very comprehensive revamp
Uh-huh.
of a lot of things.
Yeah. I mean, that's certainly very true.
And the trouble is, yeah, if even if I'm not allowed to completely delete the game, it is hard to avoid the sense that the only way to do it is to burn it down and start over.
I understand that. I think, especially as the population declines, that it becomes literally harder to uh, complete the basic storyline to get up to level 60. Because like, we tried to fight the looming specter of the Conquistador, and there literally weren't enough players online interested in joining us.
When the minimum was 3.
When the minimum was 3. And so, yeah. There's just, it's, I'd say it's regrettable, but it's not.
No, it really isn't.
I will not mourn the loss of this game. Because, right, there are moments where I think you could be forgiven for thinking there's something interesting, but in the end, I genuinely think there's nothing interesting going on under the hood here.
Yeah.
And, I mean, when the best I can say is, do you see this shit, Edward Said, for an entire late game area?
Yeah.
It's revealing. It's super revealing. I think it reveals all of... But, you know, when I started the series, I thought this game was dangerous because it has the potential to reinforce things because of how popular it is. Now it's just like, wait, this is obviously just a symptom of a lot of Western neocolonialist implicit understandings of history, and does not influence, strengthen, or cause any of them.
Yeah.
It is useful as a distillation of Anglo-American failures.
Yeah. That's... Yeah.
And yeah, I think that is a pretty
That was
good...
one question, and I think you said you had 2.
Yes. The other one is, of course, where can people find you if they like this?
Cool. So, my main and basically only platform is on Reddit, principally r/AskHistorians. If you just go to my profile, you'll find me commenting a lot on Hololive, so just go straight to Ask Historians. I guess the other thing to shill is that if you want to hear more of my voice specifically, I'm quite frequently a host for the Ask Historians podcast, which is a thing that we have. So that's also a place to go. The most recent one I hosted was with Dr. Joseph Ho on the topic of missionary photography in 20th century China. So if anyone is interested in missionaries, modern China, or photography, have a listen of that, because I greatly enjoyed his book and I greatly enjoyed talking to him. So.
Awesome. Then I think we will...
Oh, I should probably mention my Reddit handle is Enclaved Microstate. Which, I mean, if you're looking at the Twitch chat, you will have seen me there as well.
Yes. It is... I cannot confirm. Your stuff on Ask Historians is excellent.
Merci.
And, you know, also all the conversations about the Ask Historians conference and all that jazz. We can just chill for Ask Historians all day. Between the two of us, we could chill all day for them.
Yeah, we could just do a chat stream that is nothing but Ask Historians is brilliant. Although, to be fair, I am an interested party because I'm a moderator, but still.
And I'm a Flirt user, so I'm only slightly less disinterested.
Yep.
So, anyway, chat, I think we will probably next week I'll at least spend part of the stream doing a post-mortem of Historians versus New World. But this is where we'll kind of wrap up for today. As always, thanks to the patrons who make the streams possible. But the next stream is going to be my favorite. I've been playing about it for a year and a half. We're not going to stop now. AC Valhalla: Dawn of Ragnarok. They're releasing a third DLC on Thursday, and I'm not ready.
Hurrah!
Hurrah!
Hooray!
I can complain. I'll have even more fodder for far too long posts on Ask Historians about AC Valhalla. So that'll be Friday, and I'll be joined by folks from the Save Ancient Studies Alliance. So that'll be at 4 p.m. So get hype, spread the word. Otherwise, thank you. Big round of applause for Jeremy for coming on, and for all of the
Thank you for having
fascinating,
me.
all of the fascinating stuff about Qing colonialism. And at some point, I'm going to have you on just to talk about Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, because I know
As
you can
long
go
as
all day.
someone makes a game about them.
I mean, they're such good
Like-
fodder for a game, though.
The devs of Ultimate General Civil War did propose it, but basically, the Chinese audiences said it would be too political.
Rip.
So that's not happening.
Sag.
Like- I guess, like, Fall of the Samurai has one ship model that was originally used against the Taiping and then sold to one of the Japanese domains.
Wow. Incredible. That is...
Like, that's how desperate you need to get. I guess whenever Victoria 3 comes out, the Taiping will probably be part of it.
That's true. That's true.
So-
Vicky 3 is the game that exists.
That will exist.
True. At some point in the future, it will have existed.
Someday, one day.
Uh-huh. Anyway,
There's that.
chat, I think we will leave it here. So, have a good night. This has been Ludo History, and this is, for now, the finale of Historians versus New World. Alright, have a good night.
Same from me.